Merci, Sabina. Bonjour tout le monde. Bienvenue à Scholars Portal des en français 2025. Merci de nous avoir rejoints pour cette présentation cet après-midi. Cette session est en cours d'enregistrement. Elle sera incluse dans l'enregistrement d'aujourd'hui complet, donc cette session en français et aussi la session après celle-ci en anglais. L'enregistrement sera partagé sur la chaîne YouTube de Scholars Portal dans les semaines prochaines. Un agenda avec plus d'informations sur les présentations aujourd'hui et aussi les diapositives sont disponibles sur Spotbox. Si vous avez des questions au cours de cette présentation, vous pouvez les poser dans la section Q&A. Si vous avez d'autres commentaires, mais pas de questions, s'il vous plaît, les mettre dans le chat. Le fait d'avoir les questions et d'autres commentaires ou discussions dans ces deux endroits séparés, ça nous permet de suivre le plus facilement les questions afin qu'aucune ne soit manquée. Alors, on va commencer avec une reconnaissance territoriale. Nous voulons reconnaître la terre sur laquelle Scholars Portal opère et sur laquelle la plupart des employés de Scholars Portal vivent et travaillent. Depuis des milliers d'années, c'est la terre traditionnelle de Huron-Wendat, des Seneca et des Mississauga du Crédit. Aujourd'hui, ce lieu de rencontre abrite encore une population autochtone diversifiée de toute Turtle Island et nous sommes reconnaissants d'avoir l'occasion de travailler sur cette terre. Nous vous encourageons à réfléchir à la terre d'où vous nous rejoignez aujourd'hui et ajouter votre propre reconnaissance dans le chat. Eh bien, l'ordre du jour pour aujourd'hui, nous entendrons des mises à jour sur 3 services du Scholars Portal, le DNF, le dépôt numérique fiable, Scholaris et le GeoPortal. Il y aura du temps pour les questions à la fin de chaque mise à jour, mais toutes les questions auxquelles nous n'avons pas le temps de répondre en direct, ils peuvent être répondues par la suite avec la fonction Q&A. Alors maintenant, je vais le passer à Sabina Pagano pour parler du dépôt numérique fiable.
Merci, Gabi. Et avant que je parle du DNF, je vais commencer avec quelques mots sur notre thème pour cette année, ce qui est construire avec l'intention. Et quand nous pensons à ce thème, nous réfléchissons sur quelques points. Premièrement, la nécessité d'avoir des fondations stables sur lesquelles nous pouvons compter en période de perturbation et de transformation. La valeur des travaux d'entretien pour la durabilité de long terme de nos infrastructures et aussi nos valeurs fondamentales en tant que profession. Alors, la création de Scholars Portal s'est faite dans une période de bouleversement et de transformation vraiment profond. C'était 2002, l'Internet était en train de devenir omniprésent et les ressources électroniques étaient vraiment en compétition avec les ressources imprimées pour la première fois. Et il y avait une prolifération de fournisseurs offrant des services numériques aux bibliothèques. C'est peut-être un peu difficile à imaginer maintenant parce qu'il y a maintenant seulement comme 3 fournisseurs de bibliothèques, mais à l'époque, il y avait beaucoup de différentes options. Et à l'époque, nos prédécesseurs à Scholars Portal ont réfléchi vraiment très attentivement aux services qu'ils créaient et à la meilleure façon de les créer. Alors, nous avons créé Scholars Portal périodique afin d'offrir aux bibliothèques membres un accès à les ressources électroniques qui seraient fiables et disponibles à long terme. Et aujourd'hui, nous pouvons vraiment récolter les fruits de cette réflexion soigneuse car nous sommes bien placés pour maintenir l'accès à nos ressources, par exemple après la termination des contrats avec les fournisseurs. Et dans le nouveau climat de perturbation dans lequel nous nous trouvons aujourd'hui, nous devons continuer à construire de manière réfléchie et intentionnelle afin de laisser un héritage similaire à la prochaine génération de bibliothèques universitaires. Alors, avec ce contexte, un moment, je dois partager mon écran ici. OK, parlons du dépôt numérique fiable. Alors, qu'est-ce que c'est le dépôt numérique fiable à Scholars Portal? C'est un autre terme pour notre plateforme Scholars Portal périodique, qui est une plateforme pour héberger localement les ressources électroniques, principalement les revues électroniques qui sont achetées ou licenciées par les consortiums OCUL ou bien le RCDR, ainsi que les ressources en libre accès. Alors, nous avons au moment plus de 70 millions d'articles en texte intégral venant de plus de 27 000 périodiques sur la plateforme. Scholars Portal périodique a été lancé en tant que service de l'OCUL en 2002 à partir d'un travail antérieur à l'Université de Toronto visant à vraiment préserver les revues électroniques qu'on achetait. Alors vraiment, le but était d'avoir un contrôle sur les ressources électroniques dans nos collections de la même manière que nous avons un contrôle sur les ressources imprimées et de ne le pas laisser seulement dans les mains des fournisseurs. La plateforme est devenue un dépôt numérique fiable ou DNF en 2013. Et en 2023, on a commencé la transition de la plateforme de l'OCUL envers le RCDR. Et c'est ce que je vais parler un peu aujourd'hui. C'est cette transition-là. Et dans la session en anglais, un peu plus tard cet après-midi, Jacqueline, Whyte, Appleby va partager encore plus d'informations en anglais à propos de cette transition. Alors, notre DNF est en train de passer d'un service OCUL à un service du RCDR, c'est-à-dire du niveau provincial au niveau national. Il y a beaucoup de travail pour faire cette transition-là et il y a 3 éléments en particulier pour faire la transition. Le premier élément, c'est la gouvernance. Alors, ça veut dire qui supervise le service, qui lui donne la direction, une orientation, la gestion, et aussi comment le payer. Alors, ce travail est en cours, le changement de gouvernance. Il y a maintenant un mandat pour un comité directeur au niveau du RCDR et le premier projet de budget est en cours de discussion. Nous sommes aussi en train de finaliser un accord de service entre le RCDR et l'Université de Toronto, qui est le hôte, disons, de Scholars Portal. Alors, le deuxième élément, ce sont les licences. Nous devons obtenir, nous à Scholars Portal, devons obtenir plusieurs droits de la part des fournisseurs pour chaque institution qui utilise notre plateforme et chaque institution doit aussi avoir les droits d'accès perpétuel pour tout le contenu sur Scholars Portal. Alors, les bibliothèques en OCUL ont déjà les droits qu'on a besoin, le droit d'utiliser Scholars Portal périodique pour la préservation et l'accès à long terme et aussi, comme j'ai dit, les droits d'accès perpétuel. Mais nous travaillons maintenant avec le RCDR pour étendre ces licences au reste du pays. C'est une des raisons que la transition prend 3 années parce que avec le cycle d'octroi des licences, pendant 3 années, toutes les licences qui sont relevant seront renouvelées pendant cette période. Alors, à ce moment, à peu près la moitié des licences sont déjà terminées et l'autre moitié seront terminées par la fin de 2026. Parce que nous avons des licences qui sont terminées, nous pouvons commencer à tester et à donner accès à certaines collections sur notre plateforme dès que nous sommes prêts avec le troisième élément, ce qui est les mises à jour de la plateforme. Et c'est vraiment la majorité de la travail qui se passe ici à Scholars Portal. Et c'est un assez grand changement pour nous. Il faut gérer les droits et les droits d'accès pour beaucoup plus de bibliothèques. Alors, nous avons un outil ou une application pour gérer les droits et gérer l'accès. Mais il a été créé quand l'octroi des licences était beaucoup plus simple parce que la plupart des licences étaient des méga ententes ou big deal packages. C'était vraiment facile, c'était on ou off pour chaque fournisseur et maintenant c'est beaucoup plus compliqué. Les achats sont beaucoup plus granulaires et nous avons beaucoup plus de bibliothèques pour lesquelles il faut gérer les droits. Alors, nous sommes en train de transformer nos données pour les droits d'accès dans un modèle de données liées qui est flexible et beaucoup plus extensible pour nous permettre une augmentation de volume et de complexité pour les droits que nous gérons. Alors, ce travail est presque fini et nous sommes en train de construire l'application pour les gérer. Et c'était un peu rapide, mais si vous avez des questions, j'ai laissé les courriels de l'équipe pour Scholars GeoPortal périodique et pour moi-même sur ce diapo et je serai ici pour les questions plus tard aussi. Alors, merci.
Merci, Sabina. Nous sommes enfin un court temps pour les questions, mais si vous avez des questions sur le DNF, veuillez les mettre dans le Q&A et Sabina peut répondre par texte. Et maintenant, on va passer à Rachel qui va nous parler de Scholaris.
Merci, je vais partager mon écran un moment. Comment est-ce que ça? C'est bien?
C'est bien.
Ah, merci.
Oui.
Bonjour tout le monde, je m'appelle Rachel, je suis une administratrice des systèmes et aujourd'hui je vous présente Scholaris, un an plus tard, le lancement d'un service national de dépôt partagé. Préparer le terrain. Scholaris est un nouveau service national de dépôt partagé offert sur une base volontaire qui vise à soutenir la découverte, la gestion, le partage et la préservation des travaux d'érudition canadiens. Les bases des Scholaris ont été posées il y a plusieurs années lorsque des consortiums régionaux et nationaux au Canada ont exploré la faisabilité dans l'infrastructure partagée. Scholars GeoPortal assure l'infrastructure technique et la gestion du service à l'aide des plateformes GSpace. La ABRC dirige l'élaboration des modèles de gouvernance et de financement en collaboration avec un comité consultatif et des groupes experts qui orientent les principaux aspects de la gestion des dépôts. Semences et terres. Deux éléments soutiennent la croissance des jardins communautaires de Scholaris. Le premier, c'était l'infrastructure technique. Le deuxième, c'était l'infrastructure communautaire. Sur le plan technique, chaque participant a leur propre instance de DSpace qui est personnalisée et hébergée par Scholars GeoPortal. Nous utilisons des outils libres pour automatiser les mises à jour et appliquer les personnalisations locales à une base de code commune, ce qui permet d'assurer un service évolutif, efficace et souple. En termes d'infrastructure communautaire, la collaboration avec la communauté, notamment par l'entremise des utilisateurs précoces et des groupes des experts, est essentielle. Les contributions orientent le travail technique et la manière dont nous concevons le service. Ils nous permettront de mieux comprendre les besoins des référentiels canadiens et de construire un service réactif, durable et axé sur la communauté. Le programme d'adoption précoce est l'un des moyens par lesquels nous mettons en place les éléments techniques et communautaires du Scholaris. Lancé en avril dernier, ce programme a 2 années basé sur des cohortes et ouverte aux établissements universitaires canadiens. Il représente une variété de cas d'utilisation et des scénarios de migration. L'appel des manifestations d'intérêt a été lancé en mars dernier pour remplir les cohortes à partir du printemps 2024. Les objectifs du programme d'adoption sont de faire migrer les participants vers DSpace et de mieux comprendre ce qui est nécessaire pour soutenir les référentiels canadiens du point de vue du service et des ressources. Et nous sommes à mi-parcours et plus de 20 institutions qui participent au programme dans le cadre de migration progressive. Plus de la moitié des écoles sont migrées à Scholaris et dans quelques mois, il y aura d'autres. Vous pouvez voir des écoles qui sont migrées dans le site web de Scholaris et pour savoir plus de notre programme, visitez la page de Early Adopter dans la section du Scholaris sur SpotDocs. Cette année est pleine de réalisations et événements marquants. Au cours de l'année passée, l'équipe de Scholaris a migré des institutions à partir des versions différentes de DSpace. Même d'autres plateformes et mise à niveau de DSpace version 7.6.3 pour toutes les instances, contribuer au code de la communauté DSpace. Nous avons mis en œuvre des personnalisations telles que l'authentification externe et l'enregistrement de DOI vers DataSite. Nous avons les appels réguliers avec les participants qui nous permettent le développement de services en collaboration et partager l'apprentissage collectif. En termes de l'infrastructure communautaire, nous avons organisé les appels à la communauté et des heures de travail. Nous partageons des ressources, fournir des mises à jour de services et nous participons dans les conversations avec les communautés élargies d'e-space. Et puis, alors, les groupes d'experts ont également connu une année chargée dans le jardin du Scholaris, coordonné par le ABRC. Le groupe offre des conseils et un soutien dans 3 domaines de services, les métadonnées et la découverte, la thèse et mémoire électronique et la préservation numérique. Les progrès au cours de cette première année sont impressionnants. Vous pouvez maintenant trouver les recommandations publiées sur T-Space et nous sommes extrêmement reconnaissants à ces groupes de poursuivre leur travail une année de plus et nous sommes impatients de voir ce que l'avenir nous réserve. Leur collaboration apporte une expertise et une perspective précieuse qui ont un impact sur le développement de Scholaris. Alors que Scholaris continue de quoi, nous nous concentrons sur la durabilité, on prend soin de ce que nous avons déjà construit, tout en préparant la croissance future et bien se préparer le jardin pour toutes les saisons. Cela inclut une collaboration continue avec les premiers utilisateurs du groupe d'experts. Nous prévoyons de passer à d'e-space Whyte dans le courant de l'année, ainsi que de mettre en œuvre les nouvelles fonctionnalités demandées par les utilisateurs précoces. Et merci à tous qui nous joignent dans cette aventure et qui contribuent à l'épanouissement du jardin communautaire Scholaris. Il s'agit notamment de nos partenaires en développement, les participants précoces, des membres de groupes d'experts, des comités consultatifs, des consortiums régionaux et toutes les personnes impliquées dans la communauté des référentiels ouvertes. Ces gens sont des exemples éclatants du dynamisme et de la communauté des dépôts au Canada. Elles sont généreuses, patientes, curieuses. Elles posent d'excellentes questions et proposent souvent des solutions créatives et innovantes. Et bien sûr, un grand merci à notre merveilleuse équipe de Scholars GeoPortal. Et je n'oublie pas, merci à nos chefs de service, Julia Gilmore et Mohana Sarmiento. Vous êtes des êtres humains incroyables. Ce voyage a été extraordinaire grâce à vous deux. Et enfin, merci à notre équipe de système. Et voilà ce qui conclut ma présentation aujourd'hui. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Rachel. C'est vraiment une première année fantastique pour Scholaris. Alors, on a quelques minutes pour des questions. Si quelqu'un a une question pour Rachel. On va attendre une minute.
Je parle très vite.
Non, c'est bien. Oh, il y a... C'est bon. Des questions. Il y a beaucoup d'informations.
Oui.
On va prendre une minute pour formuler des questions. OK, peut-être on va continuer, mais s'il y a des... Oh, questions. Oui, bien. À l'UOF, nous sommes implantés d'e-space. Nous sommes dans les premières étapes. Est-ce que la recommandation est d'aller avec le projet consortial ou pas encore? Et UOF, c'est quelle école? Juste, pour clarifier.
Oh,
Université d'Ontario français. Merci. Merci, Mohamed.
je pense que ça dépend quels sont les types de fonctionnalités que vous avez besoin pour votre ancien CD Space, parce que notre équipe, nous avons vu et nous avons beaucoup de discussions à propos les cas d'utilisation qui sont différents avec chaque école. Je pense que ça dépend. Est-ce que vous voulez les personnalisations comme l'authentification externe, l'utilisation de DOI? Peut-être on peut discuter après cette réunion. Nous avons
Et peut-être un courriel.
peut-être
Oui.
oui. Peut-être on peut continuer cette conversation à courriel. Notre courriel, c'était info@scholaris.ca. Je peux taper le courriel dans le chat, peut-être.
Bien, oui, ça va. C'est très bon. OK. Merci. Et on va continuer. On va passer à René Duplain de l'Université d'Ottawa pour parler sur le redéveloppement pardon, du Scholars GeoPortal.
Oui, merci. Est-ce que vous pouvez voir mes diapos?
Oui. Oui, c'est bien.
Bon, ben bonjour tout le monde. Moi, c'est René Duplain, bibliothécaire en SIG à l'Université d'Ottawa et coprésident du groupe de travail sur le projet de redéveloppement du Scholars GeoPortal. Je tiens à remercier Alicia Urquidi-Diaz, la chef du projet à Scholars Portal, qui a beaucoup aidé avec les diapos que je vais vous présenter aujourd'hui et qui présentera elle-même aussi cet après-midi en anglais sur le même projet. Un rappel que le Scholars GeoPortal est un portail de données géospatiales universitaires de OCUL qui fournit aux chercheurs et aux chercheuses et aux étudiants et étudiantes un portail en ligne pour rechercher des ensembles de données géospatiales, explorer les caractéristiques basées sur des cartes et télécharger les données SIG. Lancé en 2012, il s'appuie sur une infrastructure qui est maintenant vieillissante et a besoin d'être redéveloppée. Donc, ce groupe de travail sur le projet de redéveloppement du GeoPortal a commencé ses travaux en septembre 2024 et comprend 20 membres au total. Je vais vous présenter aujourd'hui les mises à jour des projets et des groupes de travail, des sous-groupes, les collections sélectionnées qu'on a choisies, ainsi que les nouveaux flux de travail et les préversions planifiées. Donc, comme je l'ai mentionné, je suis coprésident, sortant maintenant parce que je vais rentrer dans mon congé académique en juillet. Mais Lynne Trimble, qui est la coprésidente, va continuer aussi dans ce rôle. On a une fois par mois, on se rencontre le premier mercredi. Notre groupe de travail sur le redéveloppement se réunit pour des mises à jour générales, notamment sur les métadonnées, les développements du front-end et la communication. Dont les trois, on a créé des sous-groupes. Le sous-groupe de métadonnées, on se rencontre environ 2 fois par mois pour parler de la logique des collections, les flux de changement, de chargement, les modèles de métadonnées, les schémas, les vocabulaires contrôlés, ainsi de suite. Alors, beaucoup sur les métadonnées. Le groupe du front-end, on se rencontre environ 1 fois par mois parce que des fois, c'est très technique. Puis ça requiert un peu plus de travail entre les réunions pour avoir des bonnes mises à jour. Mais c'est vraiment les conceptions du site, du GeoPortal, les fonctionnalités de recherche, d'exploration, le branding, ces genres de choses. Et on a un troisième sous-groupe de travail euh, sur la communication à venir. Donc, on fait juste commencer ce groupe-là et ça sera environ 1 fois par mois aussi nos réunions pour établir des plans de communication, la documentation, les guides d'utilisation, vraiment comment communiquer les mises à jour du projet. Et il y a un lien ici pour la nouvelle page d'accueil. On peut mettre sur le chat. Donc, voici quelques maquettes préliminaires de la page d'accueil du nouveau GeoPortal. Ces maquettes illustrent la nouvelle image du portal avec ses nouvelles couleurs. L'image du haut est la nouvelle page d'accueil du GeoPortal. La nouvelle page d'accueil comportera une grande barre de recherche de données ainsi que des liens permettant d'afficher des pages de navigation personnalisées pour les collections de données présentées. Quand les usagers cliqueront sur Recherche, la liste des résultats s'affichera à côté d'une carte web qui permettra une navigation visuelle et spatiale. Et les usagers pourront sélectionner des couches à visualiser directement sur la carte. Donc, les maquettes en ce moment sont seulement en anglais, mais c'est pour vous donner une petite idée. Donc, en utilisant le catalogue de métadonnées du GeoPortal, qui a été révisé récemment, le front-end met en œuvre des facettes et des filtres de navigation avancés, toujours conçus avec nos usagers à l'esprit. Donc, les usagers pourront filtrer par sujet, par mots-clés, par fournisseur et index, ainsi que, c'est clair, par mots-clés, par région. L'équipe de développement est occupée à mettre en œuvre ces conceptions dans le cadre de AngularJS. Voici une capture d'écran du prototype du front-end du GeoPortal. Donc, on pourrait aussi chercher par quelle couche qui a été ajoutée plus récemment. Comme je l'ai mentionné, le nouveau portail comportera des pages personnalisées qui serviront de point de départ pour des collections sélectionnées et complémentaires, telles que la vaste collection historique de cartes topographiques du Canada, donc on a plus que 10 000 cartes déjà dans le portail. Alors, qu'est-ce qui est en brun ici sur l'image et qu'est-ce qui existe déjà dans notre version en ce moment du portail? Mais on cherche aussi à ajouter plus de cartes numérisées de cette collection qui est en bleu ici. Donc, en ce moment, notre couverture était principalement axée sur les zones urbaines du sud du Canada. Mais on va en ajouter qui va maintenant étendre au Grand Nord en couvrant de vastes régions des territoires, ainsi que les zones les plus au nord des Maritimes, de la Colombie-Britannique, du Québec, de l'Alberta, de la Saskatchewan et du Manitoba. Donc non seulement qu'on crée une nouvelle version du portail, mais aussi on ajoute des données et on améliore nos collections. Alors voilà la maquette préliminaire du nouveau GeoPortal tel qu'il apparaît dans la fenêtre de navigateur. L'image montre la page de navigation du GeoPortal. Le panneau à gauche affiche une liste de cartes avec des vignettes et un petit résumé des métadonnées, où l'image met en évidence certaines fonctionnalités, donc la lecteur d'animation, le split compare et le tri chronologique. Le panneau latéral droit montre la fonction split compare, qui va être une nouvelle fonctionnalité du GeoPortal sur deux cartes de Toronto à différents moments historiques. Nous développons également une nouvelle méthodologie qui consiste à extraire le texte des cartes numérisées et à l'intégrer dans nos métadonnées. Cela permettra aux usagers de rechercher un mot-clé tel que dam, comme qui est montré ici, euh, et obtenir toutes les cartes topo où ce mot a été détecté. Il s'agit d'une fonction de recherche plus approfondie qui va bien au-delà du nom général de la région et des lieux communs comme qu'on fournit en ce moment. Et voici un calendrier provisoire des versions du GeoPortal. Désolé, c'est en anglais, mais je vais le traduire en français en passant à travers. Alors, pour l'été qui s'en vient, on a un prototype, un environnement de test interne qui va être produit, donc pour les membres de Scholars Portal seulement. En, euh, en automne qui s'en vient 2025, on va avoir une version alpha limitée qui va nous offrir un environnement de test à accès limité, donc pour les membres du groupe de travail ainsi qu'au cours. Et en printemps 2026, c'est là qu'on prévoit avoir une version bêta communautaire avec un environnement de test pour les collections pilotes, euh, pour obtenir des commentaires de la communauté, des rétroactions, ainsi de suite, de la communauté des bibliothèques d'Oco. Et ça va être en automne 2026 qu'on prévoit avoir notre version complète qui va être bilingue du GeoPortal, où qu'on va être capable d'avoir encore plus de rétroaction de le reste de la communauté. Alors, je tiens encore à remercier tous ceux et celles qui ont contribué au projet et sont nombreux, c'est clair. Un grand merci encore à Alicia pour son rôle en tant que chef de projet et Amber et Anugra pour tout leur travail, ainsi que Lynne. Je pourrais nommer tout le monde. Et si vous avez des questions, n'hésitez pas à nous contacter au datagis à commercial scholars.ca. scholars.portal.info, puis on serait content de répondre à vos questions. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup, René. Alors, s'il y a des questions pour René sur le GeoPortal, s'il vous plaît, les mettre dans le Q&A. Et alors, ceci conclut Scholars Portal Days en français. SP Days se dérouleront désormais en anglais. Commençons en quelques minutes, une minute, jusqu'à 15h30. Alors, restez avec nous si vous êtes intéressé par les mises à jour sur Scholars Portal en anglais. Il y aurait un petit peu de répétition, mais aussi des nouveaux contenus, ainsi que les présentations éclairs et bien sûr le défi des animaux de compagnie. Alors, on va passer en anglais dans une minute. Merci beaucoup à tous nos présentateurs et à tous qui ont nous rejoint pour cette présentation. Okay, and for everybody joining us for this afternoon in English, welcome back. Give us 1 minute to switch languages and we will get started shortly. All right. I think we are good to go. I see our numbers going up. So we will get started. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Welcome to day 2 of Scholars Portal Days 2025, Building with Intention. My name is Gabby Crowley. I'm the Client Services Librarian at Scholars Portal, and I will be your host for Scholars Portal Days again today. A couple of housekeeping notes to get us started. If we could go to the next slide, please, Jacqueline. Thank you so much. The event is being recorded, and the recordings will be posted to the Scholars Portal YouTube channel, hopefully in the next week or so. All presentation slides are now available on SpotDocs. There's a link on the slides, and that will also be available in the chat. So you can go ahead and download those if you'd like and follow along. We have live captions available in English. So thank you so much to our captioner, Lori from Scribeware, who is doing our captions for us today. You can turn those on using the captions button in the Zoom bar at the bottom of your screen. And you can also view these live captions in a separate browser window if you would prefer through with Stream Text. And again, there's a link for that in the chat. In terms of questions and discussion, we're going to follow same process as yesterday. If you have any questions for presenters, for speakers, please put them in the Q&A module. And then any other comments, conversations, discussions, anything like that, that can go in the chat. But just keeping questions and conversation separate just helps us to keep track of questions and make sure that no questions get missed for our presenters. And we do save the Q&A after as well. So it's really great to make sure that all the questions are in there. You should be able to see all the questions that anyone submits, and there's the option to answer by typing the response as well. So if we run out of time for sort of answers out loud in real time, presenters can still respond to your question by typing the answer. The default setting for chat, again, is I believe it's hosts and panelists only. So just take a quick minute to go to that little drop-down menu at the bottom of the chat box there and change that to everyone if you would like to be able to chat with all of the attendees and not just our hosts and panelists for today. We ask you to be kind, considerate, and respectful. Of course, disrespectful behavior will not be tolerated. Anyone engaging in such behavior will be removed from the meeting. So please be kind. And if you would like to chat about the event today outside of our Zoom discussions and on social media, please feel free to use our hashtag, which is hashtag SPDays25. You can tag us as well. We are on Blue Sky, Mastodon, and LinkedIn. And finally, I just want to take a minute to say a really quick thank you to everyone who has helped with Scholars Portal Days this year to make it a success. And that includes all of you for attending. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you so much to all of our speakers, presenters, moderators, anyone who is helping with any presentations. Thank you again very much to Lori from Scribeware for giving us these captions. We really, really appreciate it. And thank you so much to this year's planning group for your time and your ideas and all of your work through this process the past few months. So that's Lynne Serviss from McMaster, Cheryl Hook from York, Sarah Simkin from Carleton, Sabina Pagato from SP, and Katrina Fortner from Oakle. And an extra thank you to Sabina and Katrina for all of your Zoom help behind the scenes today. And the star of the show this year truly is Bart's designs for the year. We've had so many comments of people loving the beautiful honeycomb and the bee designs and the bright colors. So thank you very much to Bart for the wonderful designs this year. We do want to begin our programming with a land acknowledgement to acknowledge the land on which Scholars Portal operates and upon which most Scholars Portal staff live and work. For thousands of years, it's been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we're very grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land and to gather together for discussions like today. We encourage you to reflect on the land on which you're joining us from today, and of course to add your own acknowledgement in the chat if you would like. You can visit that link that Katrina has shared in the chat to nativeland.ca if you would like. And now I'm going to pass it over to Jacqueline Whyte Appleby, our Associate Director, for some opening remarks.
All right. Hi, everyone. Sincere apologies for that. 5 years into using Zoom for everything, and I'm still working on it. All right. I'm delighted to be able to give some opening remarks today. It's great to see so many of you here. A lot of you who were here yesterday, and some of you are new, so welcome to everyone. Once again, we have attendees from all across the country, from fellow regional consortia and from Oakle. We also have some folks here from government libraries and beyond. And I mean, you know, with all the kerfuffles, this is something that's really great about shifting to hosting events online is the expansion of attendees and the opportunities for so many more of us to gather together and talk through the things we're working on, to celebrate the work that so many of you are part of, and to just discuss projects, ideas, questions. So building with intention. Our theme this year is building with intention, and we came to that theme by thinking about a whole bunch of things. We thought it was just really pertinent, but the need for a stable foundation in times of disruption and transformation, the value of maintenance. It's not exciting, it's not glamorous, but when we talk about sustainability, maintenance work is a form of care for ourselves and for our future selves. The core values of our profession, our commitment to collaboration, and you know, what all of these elements mean for Scholars Portal as a service provider, but also as a partner. Bianca's keynote really set a wonderful tone for us yesterday, thinking about mindful design, attention to methodology, and above all, reciprocity. We also heard about some strategies for more sustainable accessibility alternatives, opportunities to leverage new tools and shared collections amid changes to the e-resource landscape. And Catherine Steves and Carrie Weaver gave us an update on the work being done on the AIML program, and I will talk a little bit more about that as well. Again, yesterday's talks just really emphasized our partnerships with colleagues at member institutions and fellow consortia, and how essential they are to harnessing our shared strengths and creativity. So I'm excited for Scholars Portal staff to talk a little bit more today about the work that we've been doing, and to give you some exciting updates on a number of services. I'm going to talk briefly about the CRCAN TDR progress and the AIML project. We're going to get a GeoPortal redevelopment project update, an update on Scholaris 1 year in, and a little bit about our preservation services and some of the assessment work that's been going on here. We also have some fantastic lightning talks lined up today related to these services. It's always so fun to work on these services and then to hear the ways that they are being engaged with across Oakle and beyond. So just before I move into my first update, Gabby called out everyone on the Scholars Portal Day planning team, and once again, thank you so much, Lynne, Cheryl, Sarah, Katrina, Sabina. But especially to Gabby, as I'm sure many of you have noticed. She is the engine behind yesterday and today, and this would not be possible with all of her work, and we appreciate it so much. All right, with that, I'm going to move on to my first update, which is talking about local load for TDR. This is my, yes, year 2. So this is a 3-year project that I'm sure many of you are familiar with at this point, to move Scholars Portal journals from being a local service to a national service, and opening up Scholars Portal journals for CRCan members for preservation and for access. So we're on year 2. So how are we doing? So there are 3 parts to this project. The first is governance. So who oversees the service, who's going to give it direction, how are we going to pay for it? The steering committee terms of reference is up and running. The first draft of the budget is under discussion, and we're wrapping up work to finalize a service agreement between UTL as the service provider of Scholars Portal and CRCan, that's University of Toronto Libraries. Licensing, this is really a big chunk of the work. We have rights for local schools to access this content on Scholars Portal journals for the long term. We are working with CRCan to get these agreements expanded, so over the 3 years of the project, so that we have those same rights for all CRCan members. About half of the licenses are done or close to done, and this is mostly because of the licensing cycle. Most of them are 3-year terms, so between 2023 and 2026, almost all of them will come up for renewal. But as we're finishing licensing, we can start with some testing and giving access to some collections, which brings me to the third part, which is really where Scholars Portal is focusing most of our energy, and that is on the platform revamp. So entitlements management for Scholars Portal journals. When we started Scholars Portal journals, pretty much everyone bought into those big deals, and so you either gave a school access to a collection or you didn't. As you know, the landscape of how journals are purchased and how perpetual access is negotiated has changed a lot. There's a lot more specificity in which schools have perpetual access to which journals year by year. So there's already been so much more complexity than we have historically had built out, and now we're adding like 50 new schools to that. And so the granularity that is required to manage those entitlements properly is a lot. So we are working on new entitlements app, more than an app, a whole database, and I'm going to show you what that looks like with some screenshots. We're doing it in linked data, and so this is what that data looks like. This is in the back end. So as you can see, these are triples associated with the University of Guelph, and each of the third section represents a collection that they subscribe to. So my arrow is pointing to 144, which is a Taylor and Francis Current Journals collection. So on the front end, the idea is, and this is now a live site that we're still configuring a little bit, but it's basically there, is that an administrator from Guelph can log in and see, okay, what are the journals collections we subscribe to? What is the start date? What is the end date? And as you can see, the archives all end on December 31st, 1995. And then Taylor and Francis Current starts on January 1st, 1996. And that also looks like this on the back end. So you can see collection 144, which is, again, that Taylor and Francis Current, and you can see all of the ISSNs associated with it, and that those ISSNs, as of January 1st, 1996, are associated with this collection. And again, just drilling down a little bit, okay, the Guelph user then clicks on the Taylor and Francis Current journals, and what they see is each of the ISSNs that are within that collection, the start date, the end date if there is an end date, and then whether they have perpetual access to those ISSNs. So this is pretty close to ready. We're continuing to work on the licensing for a lot of these, and as those are signed, schools outside of OCL should expect to hear from us about starting to access Scholars Portal journals. So again, the project is meant to wrap up in May 2026. We're on track to do that, but probably there will be some access before then as we sort of work through how to move over to this entitlements module. The next thing I'm going to talk about is the OCL AIML Government Documents Project. So my colleague Catherine Steves, who is the OCL AI/ML program director, gave an update on several of the projects along with Carrie Weaver, our new program manager. But I'm here to give a deep dive specifically on this project because it's one that we've been heavily involved in. So as some of you may know, starting in, I think, late 2020, early 2021, the University of Toronto did a mass digitization of their government documents. It's around 50,000 documents. They were scanned, made freely available online on the Internet Archive, and then moved into long-term storage to free up space. I'm sure this is a story that may be familiar at your school as well. Students need space, the collection is digital, so it goes into storage. So this is a very interesting collection. There's a lot of cool stuff there, but it was scanned, a lot of it was scanned during the pandemic when there was very limited access to the space and it needed to be done kind of in a hurry. So there's a real mixed bag in terms of the metadata that's available. And this is not only because of that, it's also because a lot of them are old government documents. And so they just sort of have minimal or skeletal metadata. And so the example that I have on the screen here, you can see there's Statistics Canada, but there's also Canada Statistics Canada, the Domain Bureau of Statistics. This imports by commodity series. It is a series. It was loaded with a single record, which is often what happens for series, but that means that every single year of it has 1944 as its year. If you're searching, that's what's available. And then this last shot is just a kind of an interesting one that I pulled out. It's called the Canada Yearbook, presumably because that is eventually what it was named, but in the year it was published, it is the Statistical Abstracts and Records. And flipping through this, it is fascinating. It's clearly written for a British audience to sort of sell Canada. It describes Canada as a very, not a place that people reading it have been to, but it's a fascinating book. So the plan, what we were going to do with all of these documents, again, about 50,000 of them, was pull that PDF, convert it to an image, run OCR on the image, save that structured text, use an LLM to extract metadata elements. This would be for use on the Scholars Portal Books platform, but also in many other places. So this is just an example of what we use on Scholars Portal. We have custom bits tags. Bits is the standard we use to designate the jurisdiction of a document, so municipal, provincial, federal, or international, then create some records. Again, for us, that would be in bits, but the assumption is that that metadata can be used in lots of different ways. And then the stretch goal, but where we did sort of hope and believe we will get to, is to use retrieval augmented generation to create a space for people to sort of be in dialogue with these documents across time, across many, many documents. The reality is that this is the OCR that we were starting with. Just to give you a sense, this is what was produced when this book is scanned. So while we knew we would need to do some OCR, I think before we started, we were a bit more optimistic about what was going to be available to us. So the issue in this particular case is that this is very old, thin paper. So a lot of it, what you see there, is actually text on the other side of the paper that has come through. So this is not useful information. We can't really do anything with this. So the reality is that we've spent a lot more time here. And that has been really necessary because you can't, ask questions of a sort of a garbage corpus. We need to be very confident about the OCR that we're working with. This is also because there are other projects that really want to be using this OCR workflow, such as the accessible text repository. And so having good OCR is fundamental to any of the work that we want to do. So just to give you a sense of some examples of what we've been trying. So, the OCR is challenging because there are a lot of tables, because the text is old and the pages are thin, because a lot of these documents are bilingual, but they're often bilingual in lots of different ways. Excuse me. So sometimes you have a column in English and a column in French. If it's a pamphlet, you often have a column, English on one side, and then you flip it over, and then it's French on the other, which is a handy reading device, but for a machine means that halfway through everything is upside down. And so, you know, you can tell it what to do with that, but that's on an item by item basis. And this is really focused on scalability. So lots of reasons. This is the first model. This is sort of the default model. Probably many of you have heard of or worked with Tesseract. And as you can see, it struggled with what to do with this. Here is another one that we've quite liked, small dockling. This is a model that is much bigger than Tesseract, but still quite small. And it is finding a lot on the top, but I didn't take this screenshot just to show the top. This is actually all that it found. So because of, I don't know, because of the amount of white space between table 2 and 3, it just sort of assumed there was no more. So we would never, so nothing from table 3 was captured. OLM OCR is a much larger model, and that means it takes a lot more time, but it also means that the results are quite a bit better. And then this fourth one, I'm a little short on time, but I'll just show you. This is Marker, and Marker has been able to really output some impressive some tables that look like tables, but that are structured text that you could also ask questions of. So it's been very fun to see all of that. So again, what we're doing right now is doing a lot of testing on the DPI, the dots per inch, how much contrast we want to have on these pages, and running this process over and over again on 50 documents to ensure that we have a level of confidence with those 50 before we move on to trying to do more of them. So just to give you sort of an idea of what we're sort of about starting to get to, as we have better OCR, as we have outputs that are functionally equivalent to the original document, we can start trying to write prompts. So this is a very early example, and this is just an example of a monograph that we decided to work with. As you can see at the bottom, this one did not come with a title or anything. It was just barcoded. So what we want to do is say, extract the following information about this. And as of right now, we're working with the first 15 pages. We're still trying to sort of tune where the best point is for that, but we're doing 15 pages right now. So given this book and that prompt, this is what we got out of it. So, you know, it's not bad. It's giving us a lot more information than we had before. So we can see that the publisher is the Government of Ontario. It has listed the Ministry of Natural Resources as the authors. I think the first time we did this, it automatically gave us a city, but it just gave us Toronto. We didn't like that, so we modified the wording a little bit. And so we're starting to do this and trying to see where it works and where it's not working. So as we move on to our third step, the goal here is to figure out how we scale this. So 50 documents, 200 documents to 50,000 documents. We're starting with OCR, we're moving into metadata. We want to make sure that the table of contents are accurate, but we need to keep scaling. And we've been fairly internally focused at this point, but for folks who have expressed interest in this project or curiosity about being more involved, as we move into having more confidence with the OCR, you're going to be hearing from us more, because the metadata is an area where we recognize there are a lot of other folks with expertise, and we would like them to be a part of that conversation. The last thing I want to see before moving on is a big thank you to our team. I am talking here today, but it's not me who's doing the vast majority of this work. So Peter Bota is our technical lead. He was previously at the University of Guelph. Farquhar Hassan is our AI programmer. He was hired in collaboration with the University of Toronto's Academic Research and Collaborative Technologies group. Very lucky to have him. And we are very, very lucky to have 2 iSchool co-op students with us through the summer. They are funded by a grant from the Higher Education Quality Council of Ontario, who have built up an AI consortium that we're a part of. So Mark and Stefania, we are delighted that they're here, and they're working on across the project on all sorts of things. So hurrah for this team. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Steve. And my understanding, Steve, is that you don't have slides and I can just leave this like this.
That's totally great. Yeah. Can everybody hear me good?
You sound great.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I'm going to jump right into it. Thank you, Jacqueline. For those that don't know me, my name is Steve Marks. I'm the Digital Preservation Librarian at the University of Toronto Libraries. I've been involved with Scholars Portal and preservation services for a long, long time. Basically. So what I want to come with today is not so much a talking about use of Scholars Portal resources or the platforms, although I think that ties into everything that we're talking about here. It's more of a kind of state of the union of where digital preservation is at right now. And I think it's sort of relevant because I think there's a little bit of change in the air as far as like DP programs go. And I think those of you who are sort of in this space may agree with that, or you may not. This is definitely my opinion, but you may be feeling some of this stuff. And for those who work with digital preservation people, or for whom this is like one of many things that you're out here thinking about, consider this. I think there is some change going on in the space right now, and I don't really have any answers to some of the questions that I'm going to pose today, but I want to flag them because in the spirit of Scholars Portal Days and the spirit of the work that OCL and all our partners across Canada and the world have done, it's always been my experience that the hard questions get answered better when there's more people at the table. And so I think this is a really good place to at least like say some of this stuff and signal that this is the direction that we're thinking about moving DP activities toward at U of T, and maybe would love to hear people's considerations about these same issues. Okay. Intro aside, so why am I saying that I have a cat walking behind me who's gonna like phase in here in a second, but why am I saying that there's change in the air? Well, I think there's just a lot of things going on right now. I think those of you who are on digital preservation lists, there's some weird crash out going on right now with one of the original purported authors of OAIS. But there's also a lot of thought about what it means in today's day and age. And there's an article that came out recently, and this I'll just drop a link in the chat. This is by Stephen Abrams, which is not the Ontario guy, but this is the Harvard guy who's in charge of digital preservation. And it's about, understanding how to know when we've done good digital preservation. And I read this a couple weeks ago. It's a little bit older than that. And I think it's going to be really important. It's not an easy article to read, but if you're interested in the space, I would encourage you to give it a shot because I think it is going to have a pretty significant impact on the issues. What are the issues? Well, I'm not trying to be an observational comedian, but like, have you looked outside recently? Like, there's a lot of stuff going on that makes us think about what the long term is and what preserving things for the long term actually means. And so one of the three things that I think is a real issue for us here in 2025 is I think we need to address this longstanding myth of infinite growth. And I think that we've in the digital preservation space as much as anywhere really subscribe to the notion that more is better, right? And that we need to get more things into our repository. We need to get more things under preservation planning. We need more, right? And I think nowadays we're actually starting to understand what the cost of that is and understand that it's not sustainable necessarily to just keep adding more and more and more. Now, obviously, in collaborative projects like Scholars Portal, growth is necessary, right? We're responsible for a body of knowledge that is growing and we need to keep up with that. But I think this is where it ties back to this idea of intentionality and not mindless growth for growth's sake, but actually growth in a way that deepens the value of the services to our designated communities. That value is something that Abrams talks about in that article. Again, it's really so good, but it ties into the second thing that I think is important, which is understanding like what that value is in the first place. And if we're not going to look at numbers and assume that numbers add up to bigger numbers and bigger numbers is good, then we have to figure out what is good. And one thing that Abrams flags in his paper is this idea that a lot of the like sense making that we've done in the digital preservation space is around standards that evaluate managerial metrics, like how processes work, how effective and consistent and predictable the processes are. And even from the very beginning, it's been established that these criteria aren't necessarily don't necessarily follow that material will be preserved in a meaningful way. They just act as a signifier that it will likely be. And, 40 to 50 years into the whole digital preservation project by now, I think we have enough data that we can start to look at things and say, okay, these were preservation initiatives that were successful by their results, not just by their presumed or imputed outcomes based on what the organization or the repository looked like. I think this is where a lot of the value add that's coming in through projects like the AIML one that Jacqueline was just talking about really helps, because we're, again, not just adding to numbers on a balance sheet, but we're trying to deepen the way that our communities can interact with and make use of the objects that we're preserving. So I think that second, I think we're going to continue to move away from those sort of managerial type metrics, which means I think that there will be a lessening of importance on TDR / core trust seal type metrics in the future, as those aren't addressing some of the real problems that we and our users have. And the third thing that I think is really sort of the most fraught for us in memory institutions is this collapse of our conventional sources of authority. And I guess I mean that in a couple of different ways. One of which is, and I think we've seen this over the last few months, is that, without a doubt, most memory institutions are part of the establishment, and the establishment sort of relies on its authority to say, like, okay, give us these things. We're a collecting institution. You need to send us these things. You need to do this and treat records in thus in such a way and deposit things. And I think there's been quite a significant upsurge in people just saying, nuh-uh. And I think we don't really have an answer to that. I think that there probably is an answer that involves working with communities, working within existing community frameworks that don't involve sort of like top-down authoritative power structures. But I think we're going to have to do some work to get ourselves in that direction. The other thing that I think, and this ties all the way back to the infinite growth problem that we're facing, is that we're also don't have a good handle on authority as we would think of it as like authoritative documents. And I think we are well into an era where text is very cheap, and there's already been more text, more documents out there than anybody can reliably corral. But with generative AI like vomiting its filth forth upon the earth, like it's just too much words. And the conventional signifiers that we would use to determine whether or not the value of those words is starting to break down just under the volume of stuff and the way that people engage and deal with text. And I think as a repository ecosystem, we have a responsibility to deal with that as well. I'm out on time, so I'll leave it at that. Again, I don't have great answers for these questions, but I think that it is really a time where those of us in digital preservation are going to have to grapple with those questions. And I would love, as much as anything, to talk with anybody on this call or any of your colleagues about any of them, because like I said, it's we only ever solve problems like this together. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much, Steve. I mean, building with intention. A perfect.
That's
lightning
just it,
talk
right? That's just it. Like
for this theme and this day and this time. Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm now going to stop sharing and pass it over to Alicia for a GeoPortal update.
Thank you. Thank you, Jacqueline. Can you all hear me and see me well? I'm going to
Yes.
share my screen now. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen, so I hope you can see those slides as well.
Almost. Yep, there we go.
There we are. So thank you for that introduction. And it's true, I'm here to give some updates on the GeoPortal redevelopment project. And it's a very interesting update because we are in the middle of one of the largest reinvestment projects in Scholars Portal history. And these updates are, sorry, my slide is not advancing as it should, sorry. Yeah, these updates are covering a lot of different areas, including a bit of a sneak preview and some tentative release dates for the new GeoPortal beta, as well as some of the detail and the nitty-gritty of the project, and most importantly, what it will mean to you as members of our OCU community and users of the GeoPortal. To start, please let me summarize the work of the GeoPortal Redevelopment Working Group, which has been co-chaired since 2004 by Leanne Trimley at UTL and by René Duplain at University of Ottawa. This group was created to provide leadership and to coordinate with the OCU community and support the Scholars GeoPortal team, the redevelopment team with guidance, planning, and decision-making in all areas of the redevelopment for the duration of this project. This team has been meeting monthly, but most of the work is really carried out in 2 subgroups that meet more regularly than that to develop and design the system's components, such as currently the metadata elements of the project and the front-end components. For the side of the metadata working group, we're carrying out extensive quality checks and improvements, both to the metadata content and structure, and to the format, as well as to the metadata creation, data loading, and publishing workflows. We are upgrading control vocabularies, metadata schemas and best practices, as well as creating crosswalks and transformation tools between different metadata, geospatial metadata schemas, in particular the NAP ISO schema, the ArcGIS internal metadata schema, and the standard ISO, as well as introducing a crosswalk into the Dataverse metadata schema. For the front end, which meets also regularly, the team has been wireframing a brand new, newly branded front end for the Scholars GeoPortal platform. And the front-end team is now busy working on building their design on a brand new front-end framework. A new working group will be launched soon, where we will focus on public and community-facing materials, upgrading them, improving them, and creating brand new ones for different collections, user guides for the front end, for our featured collections, and much more. In the meantime, I'd like to invite you to check out the GeoPortal Redevelopment Project's new project landing page, as well as to stay tuned for our blog posts, as we will also be launching a blog section on Spot Docs. As to the front end, as I said, we have a bit of a sneak preview, and I wanted to show you some of the preliminary mock-ups for our front-end GeoPortal, which have been created by the front-end team. Many thanks and kudos to Bart Kawula, who's been leading that design role, and to Anugrah Shah and Nana Boateng for their work in implementing these designs into code. So right now on your screen, you can see the mocked up landing page. which shows the new branding in this kind of dark petrol green, ocean, dark ocean, deep green, some cyan, dark orange, terracotta, and some white. And again, it's only a wireframe, but we know already that the front end will feature a large search bar so that users can go directly into the search and go straight to the map results, as well as links to view custom browsing pages for featured data collections. When users hit that search button, the results list will be displayed next to a web map that allows for visual spatial browsing and where users can select layers to view directly on the map. Using the GeoPortal's carefully curated and recently revamped metadata catalog, the front end will implement advanced facets and browsing filters, always designed with our users in mind after assessing some of the most typical search and navigation use cases for the front end. At present, as I said, the team is busy implementing these designs in the Angular JavaScript framework. But for now, this is an actual screenshot of the prototype front-end GeoPortal, which is occupying all of our time, most of our time this summer, as we create that GeoPortal prototype. As I mentioned before, the new GeoPortal will have custom pages as starting points for browsing selected or featured collections, such as the extensive historical collection of Canadian topographic maps. These collections include thousands of digitized and georeferenced map sheets of the National Topographic Map Series, produced by the Canadian government since the early 20th century on 3 different scales. We're expanding coverage for one of the sub-collections in the 50,000 to 1 scale, sorry, 1 to 50,000 scale, which is currently mostly, our coverage is mostly focused on urban areas in southern Canada, and we're expanding this coverage into the Big North, covering large regions of the territories, as well as the northernmost areas of the Maritimes, BC, Quebec, Alberta, Saskatchewan, as Manitoba. On the picture in the slide, you can see in green the new coverage, and in dark yellow the current coverage in the front end. We're also carrying out major improvements to add value to this collection for our users and to enhance discovery and navigation on the front-end GeoPortal with new front-end features, taking advantage of an upgraded Mosaic dataset format, a modernized front-end built on the latest web frameworks for web maps and geospatial applications, and some enriched metadata. For example, this preliminary mock-up shows the browse page, or I guess the results page for the topographic maps. And the image highlights some advanced features that will be possible in the new GeoPortal. You'll be able to play an animation that blends across time the changes that have taken place based on the topographic maps of a given region. You'll be able to split compare, like you can see in the picture, compare side by side with a glider to see the before and after of a given region. These advanced features will allow our users to get a better sense of the collection and a better sense of the relationships between the maps from different historical moments. A text extraction project using OCR and custom trained machine learning models will extract map features from the scanned sheets, features like dams, rivers, or glaciers, those kinds of words, right? Hill, mountains, etc. So that we can use these features as keywords to improve the relevance of the search results when searching for historical maps and retrieving perhaps only the sheets that contain those features in them. Leading this project is our GIS analyst, Sarah Reeser, who will be presenting on this project at this year's Carto conference next week. So if anyone's attending, I strongly encourage you to attend that presentation as well. So what does this all mean to you? As users of the system, and as local collections managers, especially among you, you will benefit from new, simpler, and partially automatized workflows for data loading, alongside documentation and best practices for data and metadata publishing. The team is creating some publishing tools that any community developers can reuse to publish data directly to the GeoPortal using, among other tools, the Dataverse metadata admin interface. Because a major improvement is that in the new GeoPortal, metadata creation will take place on Dataverse. And this will entail some large improvements to the way Dataverse handles spatial metadata. As we developed the GeoPortal prototype over the course of the summer, we will collaborate with the Dataverse community as well in enhancing that tool and further integrating the different data systems at Scholars Portal on, I guess, harmonized workflows and platforms. Our next set of community updates will be ready by the time of our limited alpha release this fall, which we envision as a closed testing environment for any OCL members, but specifically for our working group members, who will be able to test and help us troubleshoot the platform and the data that we have loaded into it and the metadata as well. Later this fall, later in the spring, next spring, we are planning to release a community beta, which is intended as a testing environment with some test collections for feedback from the more general OCL and library community. And finally, we expect to have a full bilingual GeoPortal by the fall of 2026. We're always excited to connect with our community and share this exceptional work by a spectacular group of people. And I'd like to warmly express our gratitude for this talented and dedicated team. Redevelopment projects are intense and complex, and we couldn't ask for a more constructive, critical, engaged, collegial collaboration with all of you. The GeoPortal would not be possible without this wonderful community and all of your support. So please, please keep in touch. We're always happy to hear from you. You can email us at datagis@scholarsportal.info if you have any questions or comments, or you can also visit our Spot Docs page and the new blog on the address that I've put on that slide. I think we may have some time for, I hope we have some time for questions. But if not, you guys...
We have quite a bit of time for questions, actually, several minutes. So yeah, please add questions to the Q&A. And thank you so much for that presentation, Alicia. It's so exciting to see the redevelopment project coming along. And that last slide before this one with all the members of the working group and the project team on it, it's like overwhelming in such a wonderful way to see like how many people are involved in this project and are working on this. So it's really exciting. And thank you so much for all of these updates with these beautiful wireframes that we have. Fantastic. We have a question from Dan already in the Q&A while others are pondering and putting their questions together. So the new GeoPortal UI being built on AngularJS, is it actually Angular? With a note that AngularJS has been discontinued in favor of Angular.
It's probably Angular, and I'm wrong about it being AngularJS. So I would have to get back to you on that, but if it's...
Oh, Bart has confirmed in the chat.
Yes.
But Bart, you said to host the panelists only, so just I'll say it out loud. Bart has confirmed, yes, just Angular.
Thank you.
But yeah, just a reminder, everyone, maybe just double check that you've got your chat settings for everyone.
And thank you for that. It's you are correct.
Question from Jeff. Will all of the 1 to 50K NTS maps be digitized in the long term, and the 1 to 25K as well?
We already have, it's a huge question. Right now, the work that just completed was the georeferencing of digitized files that we got from institutions who had digitized them. So I think it was McGill University who did most of that digitizing work a few years ago. So currently for the GeoPortal, we don't have any sheets to digitize or any plans to be doing that. Although I understand that there are some community projects looking into getting together and pulling together resources to have even more extensive coverage. So I couldn't really speak to that yet. I believe in the next few months, things are going to start moving. And so I would advise you to check that space, to watch that space. But yeah, we do have some 1 to 25K sheets in the GeoPortal already. And that, I mean, we don't have any plans to be loading any more data than what we have announced, right? Like what's on this slide, unfortunately. Yeah, not a very satisfying answer, I'm sorry.
No, it's all good. It's all good. I mean, it's still a huge amount of coverage just looking at.
Yeah, and it's a huge amount of maps that many institutions still have in physical form, and there's an increasing I think movement towards wanting to digitize them. So I really hope that within the next year or so we're going to see more movement in that area. It would be great. We'd love to be a part of it.
Are there any other questions for Alicia about the GeoPortal? I see Sabina has added the new Spot Docs page that's available with some information about the project. The link is there in the chat if you want to have a look at that.
Oh, and I should also thank you too, of course, Sabina and Gabby for your communication support. Because it was Gabby and Sabina, I think mostly Gabby, who created the Spot Docs page and set up the blog. So many thanks for your support there too.
Happy to do so. I love a Spot Docs blog. Very excited to have that to get that going and being able to have that feature and sharing more updates that way as the project continues. That will be nice.
One thing I'll say though is that maybe if we still have a minute, our co-chair René, who presented earlier in the French updates on the same topic, he's going to be on leave for a year, and so he's an outgoing co-chair. Should any of you be interested in joining this group and supporting the redevelopment working group and acting as co-chair, please let us know. We are actively recruiting. You get a lot of support from us, so it's not. I mean, we hope it's not too hard, but
it's a great deal.
Yeah, it is a good deal.
Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions. So if anyone has any last minute questions, feel free to pop them in the Q&A, and maybe Alicia can keep an eye on that for the next few minutes. Otherwise, I think we'll take us into the break. We'll get an extra couple of minutes for the break. So we'll have about a 7-minute break, and we will come back at 1:35 to get started with our next update, which will be on Scholaris. So join us back here in 7 minutes. Okay, welcome back. Hopefully everyone is back with us and ready to go. I'm now going to pass it over to Julia Gilmore, our digital projects librarian, to talk about Scholaris. I will stop sharing, Julia, so you can go ahead.
Thanks, Gabby. So hopefully you can see the slides and hear me talking.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right, so thanks, Gabby. Hi, everyone. My name is Julia Gilmore, and I'm one of the service leads for Scholaris. And I'm delighted to join you today to share updates on how the Scholaris garden has been growing over the past year. It's been a really exciting year of development. And if you saw our 1 year in announcement that went out last week and is up on the Scholaris website, you'll know that we've been leaning into this community garden theme. So pardon the puns in advance here. So Scholaris is a service you may have heard something about by this point, but just in case you haven't or are interested in a refresher, Scholaris is a new national opt-in shared institutional repository service, the groundwork of which was laid several years ago when regional and national consortia in Canada explored the feasibility of shared IR infrastructure with their members and confirmed that there was strong interest in a shared model that could help alleviate local repository management challenges, as well as enhance the open discovery, management, sharing, and preservation of Canadian scholarship. So here at Scholars Portal, we're the technical service provider for Scholaris. We're building the infrastructure, hosting the platform, and managing the service using the DSpace repository software. We're also running an early adopter program, which I'll give an update on in just a few moments, and that's helping inform the development of the service. Complementing these efforts, we have Carl, who is leading the development of the governance and financial model through a shared repository infrastructure advisory committee, or SIRIAC. And they're also coordinating the wonderful Scholaris network of expert groups who are offering guidance on key aspects of repository management. And we'll have a short update from those groups as well. So there are two essential elements for growing the Scholaris community garden: technical infrastructure and community infrastructure. So on the technical side, Scholaris provides a software as a service model, hosting and managing parallel DSpace instances and providing migration and ongoing support. Each participating institution has their own branded DSpace instance. So think of this as a dedicated plot within the Scholaris community garden, for example. And that instance is hosted on a dedicated virtual machine on Scholars Portal servers. We keep the code in GitLab, and then we use an open source version of Chef to automate the management of the code and roll out updates and upgrades to the instances. Institutions have front-end access to their instances, with back-end access restricted to the Scholaris technical team. So the feasibility studies that I mentioned earlier confirmed the need for a shared repository solution that could be scalable and responsive. And the Scholaris model offers flexibility for repository teams to tailor their instance to their needs. We support the customizations and integrations that DSpace supports, and we work with institutions to add the ones that they want for their institution. Those local customizations get applied to that centralized code base, and then they're deployed to the institutions who have requested them. We don't make core code changes in the service model, but we document those requests, and then we bring them to the broader DSpace community. And as we go through the program and we have more schools participating and common needs start to emerge, and they already are starting to emerge, we plan to dedicate more time in the next year and into the future to contribute code upstream to DSpace. So more institutions and not just Scholaris schools can benefit from these improvements. Of course, Scholaris is more than just technology. Building strong community infrastructure is just as important, and it continues to be a significant focus as we grow the service. Working closely with our pilot schools, early adopters, expert groups, and repository and DSpace communities has really taught us so much already. We've learned a ton over this past year or so, and that information and feedback is helping shape the service development, including how we deliver the service and the types of support and resources that we offer. DSpace may be relatively new ground for Scholars Portal, but we're stepping into an already thriving repository landscape. And so really our aim as we do this work is to look for ways that we can contribute to and leverage the already great work and the great folks that are working together in these networks. So I mentioned the early adopter program. This is one of the key ways that we're putting together those technical and community pieces for Scholaris. So the program built off of a previous pilot project, which involved 2 local schools, and the program launched last April. It's a 2-year cohort-based program, and it's open to Canadian academic libraries. The goals of this program are to migrate participating institutions to DSpace, and through that process, better understand what's needed to support Canadian IRs from a service perspective and what's required to operate the service efficiently and on a cost recovery basis. When the program wraps up next spring, we'll shift into being a fully operational service. So we're at the halfway mark now, and we currently have over 20 institutions participating in phased migrations, which far exceeds the uptake we were planning with the program. So it's really fantastic to see all of this interest in joining the program and going on this journey with us. Over the past year or so, we've worked with institutions of varying size and local capacity to migrate or launch new repositories. This includes setting up or migrating repositories that are operating in French and migrating repositories either from an existing DSpace instance and sometimes an earlier version of DSpace, as well as migrating schools coming from a wide range of non-DSpace platforms like bpress, Hyrax, Islandora, and ePrints. Over half of the schools are now live on their Scholaris instances, with more scheduled to launch in the coming months. And if you're curious to see some of the sites that have gone live, you can view all of them and read more about the Early Adopter Program on Spot Docs. There's a Scholaris area and an Early Adopter Program page. So if the list of institutions that we're working with wasn't enough of an indication, it's been quite a productive and eventful year here at Scholars Portal with the Scholaris team. So here are some of the highlights and milestones that we wanted to mention today. So I had already mentioned we've completed a number of migrations, and we've also upgraded all of our instances, first to DSpace version 7.6.2 and then 7.6.3 this past February. We also contributed our first bug fix back to the DSpace community, which was included in that 7.6.3 release, which was really exciting. We've continued collaborating closely with early adopters to add desired customizations like theming and interface changes. Custom submission forms are a common request, as well as integrations like setting up external authentication methods, including Shibboleth and OIDC, as well as DOI registration using the DataSite API integration. And as we do this work, we're developing the complementary documentation that goes along with setting up all of these different pieces for the repository and then publishing that on Spot Docs. We hold monthly community calls with our early adopters and guest speakers to provide spaces for conversation and sharing information. And this is really important to us because, as I said, we at Scholars Portal are relatively new to DSpace, and we also don't run a local repository. So opening avenues for early adopters who may have a considerable amount of knowledge about DSpace and about repository management, having those spaces for those folks to ask each other questions, not just Scholars Portal, and to really share how they're approaching their migrations and managing repository tasks locally at their own institutions is, we hope, hugely valuable. We're thrilled to see that many schools are generously sharing their insights and resources with each other. That's really been a very heartwarming output of developing a collaborative, community-driven model. There are a lot of other areas as well where you may find us talking about Scholaris. We're always talking about Scholaris, and they're mentioned here on the slide, and they're also available on Spot Docs under the Community Resources page. Lastly, on the governance side, I wanted to mention that we finalized the Early Adopter Service Agreement, which is signed by a regional consortia on behalf of any institutions that participate in the program. And then we've also drafted a Terms of Use and a Privacy Statement for the service, which should be published shortly. We've also prepared projections for the ongoing pricing model, as well as a draft of an operational budget, which we will be looking to finalize later this year. So for institutions that are not part of the program, we often get questions about what can we expect when we're migrating over to Scholaris? What does a move to Scholaris look like? So here are the very general broad strokes involved in a migration. It starts, it's not on this slide, but it starts with an expression of interest that we receive from the institution, and then we have a conversation and an information call. But once an institution has confirmed, yes, they'd like to participate in the program, we then begin an onboarding process that involves providing training, setting up project tracking and migration resources, and setting up their development instance in DSpace. Together, we spend quite a bit of time on the development instance, working closely with repository teams to import their data and apply desired customizations and integrations. Once testing and validation is completed on the dev instance and the institution signs off, we then repeat those steps to build their production site. We go through another testing and validation phase, and then when it's time to launch, we remove the IP restrictions, and that production site is the one that goes live. And that's always a really exciting day. So that's the migration process. It's really just the first part, albeit it is a big part of the Scholaris journey. So post-launch, there's still lots of work to do. We work with the institutions to tackle post-migration tasks, so things that weren't showstoppers for launching. And then we also continue to provide ongoing technical support and maintenance. So shifting gears slightly, I'd mentioned the expert groups earlier, and we wanted to spend just a brief amount of time today to celebrate the impressive work of these groups who are significant contributors to the Scholaris Community Garden. These groups each provide targeted guidance on an area of repository management. So there's a group for metadata and discovery, one for electronic theses and dissertations, and one for digital preservation. In the past year, the Metadata and Discovery Group has delivered a suite of recommendations, including minimum viable metadata recommendations for Canadian IRs, and all of their recommendations are now available on TSpace. The ETD group has done quite a bit of work as well. They've completed a needs assessment survey. They've provided guidance on Library and Archives Canada for their harvesting program for their ETDs, and that is also available on TSpace. And then they've also drafted guidance on non-traditional theses, as well as ETD standards and workflows. And then last but not least, there's also the Digital Preservation Expert Group. They have completed a needs assessment survey and an environmental scan of institutional and digital preservation policies. They've developed a risk management matrix, and they're now testing DSpace preservation pathways that can be supported within Scholaris, as well as starting to work on developing toolkits and explainers with guidance for building or more deeply integrating preservation planning activities into repository management. The progress these groups have made in just 1 year is really remarkable, and their efforts are already making an impact not just within Scholaris, but across the broader repository community. So we're really thrilled that they will be continuing their work for another year, and we can't wait to see what they'll grow next. So we'd like to thank those members, and as well the Carl Visiting Program Officer for Scholaris, Gabrielle Mercia, for her exceptional and thoughtful leadership in coordinating these groups. So as Scholaris continues to grow, we're focusing on sustainable development and building with intention, caring for what we've already built while preparing for future growth and fortifying the garden for seasons to come. We'll be tending to our garden over the next year by continuing to migrate new institutions, continuing our work with early adopters, expert groups, and the repository community, and refining the service offering and model for ongoing service delivery. It may have already come through that we're in quite a busy migration season right now, but very soon we'll be shifting our focus to testing and upgrading Scholaris instances to DSpace version 8 later this year, as well as implementing new and requested DSpace features for our schools. We're also looking to define the digital preservation pathways that will be available for the service, as well as increasing our contributions to the DSpace community and continuing to participate in conversations within the national and international repository environments. So we really couldn't build this garden alone, and we're grateful to everyone who has contributed to its development. This includes, of course, our early adopters, who have graciously and enthusiastically been very open and on board with figuring so much of the service delivery out with us in real time. So we're very grateful for all of the schools who have joined us there, as well as members of the expert groups, the Carl Advisory Committee, regional consortia, developing partners like the University of Toronto Libraries, folks from the Scholars Portal, Carl and OCL teams, and really just broadly anyone and everyone involved in the repository and open access communities who have provided feedback and shared their expertise with us. And on the Scholars Portal side, I would really love to give a special and big thank you to Mahana Sarmiento and Rachel Wang on our technical team, whose diligence and dedication have made so much of this impressive work possible in such a short time. So thank you so much. We look forward to another year gardening with all of you.
Thank you, Julia. I love how much we're really running with the community garden theme now. I think it works really well as a metaphor. And it's just so lovely to all be gardening together. We do have about 4 minutes for questions. So if anyone has any questions for Julia about Scholaris, please do pop them into the Q&A. We've got some time. And yes, thank you for very much all the love for Mahana and Rachel. Extremely well deserved. Lots of little hearts. I hope they both saw that.
Well, and thank you to you, Gabby, for suggesting the community garden theme.
I actually don't know if the community garden theme was my idea or if that was Sabina's idea. I don't really remember. I'm glad we went with it, but yeah, it's a lovely springtime sort of metaphor, very apt. Keep an eye on the Q&A here for questions come in. There's always so much going on with Scholaris in terms of, I mean, there's so many pieces. There's all the migrations with the early adopters, and we've got not only the community calls and the information sessions, but also the new entities working hours, and then so much good work coming out of those expert groups as well. You know, the really, really helpful recommendations and the needs assessment surveys that have been conducted. It's so impressive that so much has been done in just 1 year. It doesn't feel like it's just been 1 year, and I know we sort of talked a bit about as preparing sort of a communication for that 1 year anniversary of the early adopter program and the expert groups, that it's wild how much has been done in that year, and it's very impressive. So yeah, would just like to echo your thanks and congratulations to everyone who is involved in this work so far, and you've done a fantastic job as well. So thank you to you as well.
Thanks, Gabby. I just did that thing that you said not to and sent a message to the hosts and panelists instead of everyone.
Oh,
so
I
I
didn't
just
even
put
notice
now
that
in the
time.
chat that if there are questions after this presentation at any point, you can always send us an email to info@scholaris.ca.
Tricky, that hosts and panelists only button, as if we wouldn't all want to talk to everyone here. All 200 of us. That's exciting. It's got pretty good numbers. A question. Okay, lovely. So from Matthew, Scholaris related question. Is anyone outside of WLU Laurier still using bpress Digital Commons?
This is a good question. So we're working with 2 schools, Western and Windsor, that are coming over from bpress. I know there's that the Canadian Repositories Community of Practice maintains an inventory of all of the repositories and the platforms. And I think the institutions update that on a yearly basis. So I could look to pull that up and see if there are other ones that come to mind. Oh, I see in the chat, Osgood Law is still on bpress. Now I'm curious.
Perhaps another question just while you're searching for that. Alyssa wants to know if the name Scholaris was inspired by Borealis.
Probably in some small part.
I think there was
nicely
some
together.
Yeah, there was some desire to sort of, in terms of branding of new naming convention, to have them sort of not parallel, but sort of reflect one another a little bit, as they are 2 national services with shared national governance rather than just a Scholars Portal service. So there's a little bit of sort of some mirroring there in the names as well, but then also sort of reflecting the scholarship piece of that as well. GeoPortal heads. Yes, we can get really creative, can't we, with all of our renamings of things, can't we? Yeah. Mark wants to know, how's the accessibility of Scholaris for users with disabilities, whether readers or researchers or uploaders?
Sure, that's a great question. Thanks, Mark. So we haven't made any particular accessibility customizations to the instances. I'll put a link in the chat to the accessibility statement. Accessibility is a primary focus for DSpace. They just completed a compliance report, I believe, last year, and they strive to be conformant with WCAG level AA. There are also accessibility improvements that are included in each new release, so there'll be more when we get to DSpace 8 as well. And I see that Rachel has put in the chat as well that moving to Angular also brought more updates, that this was a move to making DSpace a more accessible platform. So in the future, I think we'd like to, we have our community calls, as I mentioned, and so probably one of those we'll have centered around discussing accessibility. Sometimes we'll make recommendations in terms of theming customizations to support accessibility practices. If there's a request from an institution, we can provide some guidance there, but we haven't had to make too many large changes to the instances at this point.
Okay, great. I think we will move on to the lightning talk, if you don't mind, giving a quick introduction to that, and then I will share from my end.
Okay. Great, thanks, Gabby. So I have talked about how great our early adopters are, and now I'm really excited that we're going to welcome one of those repository teams, the lovely folks from Carleton, Manfred, Jen, and Kevin, who have contributed a lightning talk on one of the most critical and often most complex parts of a migration, which is bringing the data over successfully. Carleton took an innovative approach. They used the new DSpace 7 REST API to successfully migrate their repository data, and we were both impressed and inspired by their efforts. That was really their idea, and so we followed along closely, and we're really happy to see that worked really well for their team. So we are delighted that they've joined us today to walk us through what they did, how it worked, and to suggest other use cases for the DSpace API. So with that, I think I'll be handing the mic back over to Gabby, who's going to play the video from our
We have a
lovely folks at
pre-recorded
Carleton.
presentation today due to some unfortunate travel logistics cancellations and things, but the team was extremely prepared, and they have sent us a video recording. So I'm going to get that set up and shared. I'm going to replace your screen sharing, Julia, and I'm going to share my sound too. All right. I'm going to share this. If the volume is not working or anything, just give me a shout, put something in the chat, and I will adjust. But I think we should be okay. Here we go. Oops, sorry. 1 second.
Hi, my name is Manfred Raffelsieper. I'm a system programmer here at Carleton University, and I'm excited to be here today to present our work on building bridges, the foundations for sustainable DSpace migrations. So, here's the challenge. We are in a DSpace shop. We use Hyrax as our repository of choice, so migrating over was already going to be a bit of a challenge. When the opportunity was presented for Carleton to migrate into Scholaris, we had about 4 months to cross this bridge. But the fog was thick, but we did have options. Traditional non-DSpace repositories use large-scale SAF imports, usually through tools like Globus. But my colleague Kevin started looking into something a little different, a reusable tool with full control.
Okay, sorry, folks. I'm going to adjust. I'm going to take out my headphones, and I'm just going to play this loud, and then hopefully...
Over the entire... Hi, my name is Manfred Raffelsieper. I'm a system programmer here at Carleton University, and I'm excited to be here today to present our work on...
Was that better?
Seeing some thumbs up. It was for me as well.
Okay, great. Then I'll go back to that. Thank you. I bet that. Thank you for the tech support, folks.
Hi, my name is Manfred Raffelsieper. I'm a system programmer here at Carleton University, and I'm excited to be here today to present our work on building bridges, the foundations for sustainable DSpace migrations. So, here's the challenge. We are in a DSpace shop. We use Hyrax as our repository of choice, so migrating over was already going to be a bit of a challenge. When the opportunity was presented for Carleton to migrate into Scholaris, we had about 4 months to cross this bridge. But the fog was thick, but we did have options. Traditional non-DSpace repositories use large-scale SAF imports, usually through tools like Globus. But my colleague Kevin started looking into something a little different, a reusable tool with full control over the entire process, the API-driven approach. This is where DSPortal comes in. It's our little bridge builder to help clear the fog. It's a Python class designed to make the REST API easy to work with. It's one class, one job, wrapping up all the complexity so you can just focus on the data and where it needs to go. With DSPortal, the API becomes a single line of Python. Behind the scenes, it's doing the full handshake, the authentication, token refresh, and CSRF protection. It's your guide across the bridge, clearing the fog and managing the tricky footing so you can focus on the data. So what's going on underneath the hood? Let's dig into that. First off, it's going to be handling the initial authentication handshake at the login endpoint. Once you've been authenticated, it stores that session token. This is key. We're going to be reusing this token across the entire session instead of creating a new one every time. This is exactly what the developers of the API expect for performance and stability. Now, since your tokens can expire though, we've already built in logic that will automatically refresh that token, so when it's no longer valid, the method does a time check, re-authenticates as needed, with no manual expiry tracking, no surprises mid-deposit. On the CSRF side, the class is going to fetch the initial token from the endpoint, but it doesn't stop there. It's listening for updated tokens and will refresh the header automatically if it comes back from the server. So with all this going on, your session stays alive across the entire migration process. You don't get bounced back, you're not hammering the login endpoints, and you're not violating any of DSpace's expectations around token reuse. And the best part, you as a developer, you don't have to touch a thing. We've wrapped this all up in a single drop-in class so you can put all the focus on your development and your metadata and don't have to stress about session handling. Let's zoom back a little bit and what is actually happening in practice. So before we can send anything to DSpace, we have to collect and prepare all of our data from our existing repository. In our case, that meant working with the Samvera Hyrax stack, which uses Fedora for storage and Solr for indexing. I bring this up because this is going to be the starting point for your bridge. On the other side, we've got DSpace, which expects a totally different structure. The key part in the middle is massaging that data from whatever your repository is into the shape that DSpace wants. Fortunately for DSpace, it's expecting a JSON payload. If you've ever worked in Python dictionaries, this is refreshingly straightforward. We've pulled the data directly from Fedora's RDF endpoints, structured it into a JSON format, which DSpace is expecting, and all your metadata will be formatted here, and then you're ready to go. Once you've collected all your data, we're ready to cross the bridge. For us, we just pass it into our transfer DSpace method, which uses the session class that we talked about earlier, pushes the record up to DSpace, and it will handle the rest. We've tested this at scale with about 3,000 records in 30 minutes with no multi-threading, just pure API. And because we handled the sessions cleanly and the system stayed stable the entire time, if you want to parallelize this, you can. So there's even room to grow on this. So what would I have done different? If I had to do it all again, I would have probably spent some more upfront time thinking about what type of deposit path we would have gone with, submission or item. We opted to go for the item route, which is basically DSpace handing you the keys and saying, figure it out. You have full control, it's extremely powerful, but you are expected to know how to handle creating your items, bundles, bit streams, assigning your licenses. If you go this route, you're going to be handling all of this through the API on your own. There are exceptions to the rule though. Thumbnails are one of them, and there are a few that are likely out of the full scope of this project. Fundamentally though, it works for us as we had successful migration last April with all items deposit and our site is currently live. On the flip side, there are submission flows, which looks friendlier on paper. It does give you stages like a checklist system where you have to fill out your metadata, update your files, set your embargo and access rights, and add the required licenses. I wouldn't call this a streamlined approach. it still has its own complexity, especially around handling the in-progress state and pushing each submission through the workflow chain. You're also managing more moving parts, and you'll need to shepherd them all the way through to the final process. It more just depends on what are the use cases for your institution. That said, no matter which route you take, our class has your back because we're sharing this and making this open to the community. At the top of both submission and item deposits, DSpace emphasizes the importance of managing your tokens and authorization headers correctly. And this is exactly what this class centralizes around. So you're free to focus on the data modeling and depositing logic without getting tripped up on session handling. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, I don't know about everyone else, but very impressive work from the team at Carleton. And we're really grateful that they're sharing that knowledge and what they've learned today. And then also we'll be sharing that probably on Spot Docs as well. We have a section that's sort of resources from early adopters. And certainly as we go through more non-DSpace migrations, we're learning a lot as we work with institutions that are trying out different things like scripts as well to package the data and using the API in this example here. So there's lots of information to share as well that will help make those migrations more streamlined into the future. And Mahana's put a link to the Carleton Scholaris site here in the chat as well. And so Gabby mentioned Manfred was not able to join us today, but joined us virtually through the video. But we do have Jen and Kevin from the team here who are available to answer. I guess we have maybe 2 or 3 minutes for questions.
No, we do actually need to move ahead to the next presentation. But if you have questions, please do put them in the Q&A because as Julia said, Jen and Kevin are here, and we can also always pass the questions on to Manfred as well. So please do pop them in the Q&A if you have questions. And then now I'm going to pass it over to Julie to talk about our preservation services.
Hello. I'm just going to share my screen.
Perfect.
Alrighty. Thank you. And it's always exciting to hear how Scholaris is progressing, and that's a very impressive tool that Carleton has built for the migration. So hi everyone, my name is Julie and I'm the Digital Preservation Librarian at Scholars Portal. We're going to be pivoting from the shiny and new to some updates about how we've been building and maintaining reliable community infrastructure for Scholars Portal's preservation services over the past year. But before we start, what do we mean by maintenance and how does that relate to digital preservation? We can think of digital preservation as a form of maintenance for digital objects by maintaining their integrity, their context and history, as well as their usability and accessibility. So systems maintenance similarly focuses on ensuring the ongoing usability and access for our technical infrastructure, which supports the life of our objects. And this involves refreshing, migrating, and upgrading our systems and applications as technology changes, ensuring that connected applications continue to be able to speak to each other, and making changes to reflect and meet evolving community needs. In other words, TLC, or Tender Love and Care for Technical Systems, means monitoring, maintenance, and upgrades. So starting with the OLRC, the Ontario Library Research Cloud is our private cloud storage network with storage nodes at 5 academic libraries across Ontario, and the OLRC has been in operation since 2017. It was created to provide secure, reliable, and scalable Canadian cloud storage to member institutions for storing and sharing digital materials. And to date, the network is supporting 24 member institutions with preservation and backup storage, hosting static websites and online exhibits, and serving digital materials to user community. And this past year, we've welcomed Western, Bishops, and Vancouver Island universities to the fold, which is very exciting. So ensuring that we continue to support our growing membership with their digital storage and stewardship needs means providing TLC for the cloud so that the OLRC continues to be reliable, sustainable, and responsive to community needs. Since launching the OLRC, this has included a grant-funded project from 2019 to 2020 to integrate the OLRC with the DuraCloud application from DuraSpace and Lyrasis. And DuraCloud supports bit-level preservation management and audit reporting for objects that are stored in the OLRC by way of the DuraCloud system or tools, and also a large-scale migration to new hardware and software from 2021 to 2022, and this increased the capacity and performance of the OLRC. Over the past year, our team has been working on further improvements to OLRC infrastructure and service offerings to better support needs identified by the community, and this includes the launch of our tape backup pilot, as well as a network switch replacement project. So starting with the tape backup pilot, in May 2024, we launched the pilot in response to community interest in additional backup options when the OLRC is used as primary storage. While the OLRC replicates files across 3 of its 5 storage nodes for persistent access, these copies are linked and so they are not independent. In this case, tape backup provides participants with redundancy for disaster recovery and risk management of data that they have stored in the OLRC. The team has discussed use cases with pilot participants to better understand needs and scope the service, and some of the use cases shared include backup for born digital records, archival packages created in preservation systems like permafrost, audiovisual backups, digitized local collections, and repository materials. And born digital materials came up a few times as they're considered especially high priority since no other copies exist and they are therefore at higher risk of loss. So tape backups are currently in place for 2 schools, and conversations with 2 more schools are ongoing. And a big thank you to our participants for your time and patience on this journey. We're looking to finalize the service details for a formal launch in the coming months. And this past year, the team has been working to develop workflows and scope the service offering based on the use cases we heard. And for data that is selected for backup, this service offering supports having 4 independent copies of the data, including the primary copy in the OLRC, stored on 3 types of storage and across multiple geographic locations. So this includes the copy in the OLRC, 1 copy on-site on disk, and 2 copies on tape, 1 off-site and 1 on-site. And if you'd like to learn more about the pilot, please feel free to contact us for more details. And looking at hardware now, the team has also been hard at work to replace the network switches at all 5 of our storage nodes across Ontario. And this work was led by our Mighty Systems team and involved significant coordination between Scholars Portal and our 5 partner node institutions. This includes extensive testing with the University of Toronto Library's Information Technology Services team for configuration and replacement processes, liaising with university shipping departments to send and receive the hardware, and working closely with local IT staff at partner institutions for testing, planning, and deploying each switch. This collaborative hardware upgrade has provided improved network reliability, speed, and connectivity for the OLRC. And TLC extends to our other preservation service, Permafrost. Permafrost is our hosted digital preservation service, providing technical infrastructure to member institutions to preserve unique library and archival collections. Our technical stack includes Archivematica as the preservation processing engine, the OLRC for preservation storage, as well as optional and custom tools to support various institutional workflows. Since 2018, our community has grown to 21, including our new joiners this year, Guelph, Bishops, and the affiliated local history organization Eastern Townships Resource Center, as well as Vancouver Island University. And Permafrost is supporting the preservation of 8.5 terabytes of digital materials across more than 5,200 archival packages. Our Permafrost TLC focused on Archivematica this year. As technology changes, various Archivematica dependencies had reached the end of their life, and we responded in kind with a re-architecting of Permafrost infrastructure and a large-scale migration and upgrade. This work moves us towards greater security, stability, and efficiency for the Permafrost service in order to best support subscribing institutions with the preservation of their unique digital collections for the long term. So the migration included moving our Archivematica instances to run on Chef Sync infrastructure, which allows us to operate our infrastructure as code. And using Chef and Sync improves our ability to adapt and respond to change and to automate processes for maintaining and upgrading our production instances. As well, the underlying operating system was upgraded from its extended life support status to a fully supported long-term support version to align our practices with enhanced security policies. These infrastructure changes were accompanied by an upgrade of 20 production Archivematica instances from version 114.1 to version 116, which introduces multiple security and maintenance improvements. And last but not least, TLC across the Scholars Portal ecosystem, because preservation extends beyond the OLRC and permafrost. As our national repositories, Borealis and Scholaris, continue to grow and the tri-agencies issue mandates with deposit requirements, there is an increasing need to preserve research data and outputs in institutional repositories. As such, at Scholars Portal, we are continuing to develop and refine workflows and integrations between the Borealis and Scholaris repositories and the permafrost and OLRC preservation services to support institutions with streamlined preservation processes. So stay tuned for more information about these. And that's all from me for now. Thank you for your time. If you have comments, questions, or burning interests, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach us at cloud@scholarsportal.info to continue the conversation about the OLRC and our Take Backup pilot, or permafrost@scholarsportal.info to chat about permafrost.
Thank you, Julie. We do have a couple minutes for questions. If anyone has any questions for Julie about the OLRC or permafrost. Lots going on with preservation services, as always. And big update for permafrost this year. Just a reminder, if you do have questions, they can go in the Q&A rather than the chat, please. Just makes it a little bit easier for us to keep track.
I'll just say, while we wait, a big thank you to Systems for supporting and leading the work on all of these maintenance and migration projects. It wouldn't be possible without you. I think some of them are on the call. Others are busy.
Yes, they're here somewhere. Julia says, also, we are so grateful to Julie, who is also the chair for the Scholaris Digital Preservation Expert Group, which is very true. Tracy says, thank you for those slides. Very helpful to explain all the different tools, resources, and connections between the tools. Bina loves the TLC framework. Feels like it fits in with what Steve was talking about earlier, too. Carrie says, shout out to Julie for being an amazing guide through the permafrost onboarding process here at Guelph.
I'm glad the breakdown is helpful. It's a ongoing sort of, I don't know if challenge is the right word, but there's so many things that move, so many moving pieces that come together. Making sure that it's clear and understandable is always something that's top of mind.
Well, you always do it very well.
Thank you. It's only taken 2 years of wrangling in my brain.
No, not at all. Okay, well, if there are any questions in a few minutes, please pop them in the Q&A for Julie to have a look at after. Otherwise, I think, Julie, we can go ahead if you want to introduce the lightning talks.
For sure. All right, so I will now be handing it over to our lightning talkers, and we'll be starting with Art Rhyno from the University of Windsor to talk about pairing the OLRC with containers for low-cost computing. And Art is in transit right now, so he'll be taking questions afterwards via the Q&A module. So please feel free to drop in questions there, and he'll reply in text. And after Art's talk, we'll move straight into our next one with Henry, Zhang, Kenton Good, and Sharon Farnel from the University of Alberta to share about using AI tools to assist digital preservation workflows. And I believe I'm handing it back to you, Gabby, for Art.
You are. Thank you. And everyone, bear with me for 2 seconds again as I switch.
Hi there. I'm going to talk about using the Ontario Library Research Cloud, or OLRC, in combination with a technology called containers. The goal is to keep costs to a minimum, and my focus will be on newspaper digitization, which is considered one of the most expensive forms of digitization. With lots of help from my employer, the Liddy Library at the University of Windsor, I've been a volunteer with a project called Our Digital World for almost 20 years now. Our Digital World grew out of an initiative called Knowledge Ontario, which was a multi-sector effort coordinated by the Ontario Library Association. The provincial government pulled the plug on the funding for Knowledge Ontario in 2011, and Our Digital World has been a standalone nonprofit ever since. Ontario is a big province in Canada and has a long newspaper history, but even for someone with a mother who worked as a reporter and who owned a community newspaper for a dozen years, I was overwhelmed by the volume of newspapers that digitization efforts can uncover. This is a partial inventory of the newspapers that we've worked on from Essex County, which is a fairly small county at the tip of the province across from Detroit, and we have identified nearly 150 titles so far. The potential scope and scale of historical newspapers is staggering for most counties in Ontario. In happier times for funding, Knowledge Ontario was able to purchase a high-powered server from Local, and a number of contract developers, as well as volunteers like myself, were able to put together a system called Ink that was similar to the software stack used for Chronicling America, which had launched public access to historical newspapers in March of 2007. The great staff at Scholars GeoPortal helped keep the site going for over a decade when Knowledge Ontario lost its funding, but the equipment finally hit a wall in 2024. And this image is from one of the last crawls of the Wayback Machine off the site. Now, the good news is that there are some great options out there to serve newspaper collections. This is one example from the Impresso project in Europe. And there's no doubt that there are some excellent systems and tools publicly available. Equally impressive is the staffing and resources put forward to support this work. But the reality in Canada is much different. Container computing is interesting for many reasons, but my path to it has a lot to do with the economics of using containers to offer systems. There's a nonprofit-friendly web hosting company called Reclaim, which offers container options, and this is where this graphic comes from. Reclaim mostly serves academic customers, and my library has used them for several projects over the years. But the key concept with containers is the notion of paying for use rather than provisioning infrastructure in advance. Containers sort of spring into existence and then disappear as needed. Reclaim has a YouTube channel, a presence on Discord, and quite a few public presentations on their technology options. They are well worth looking at if you are on a tight budget, but also if you have an IT project that is running into barriers in a campus setting, as more and more campuses lock down or eliminate local IT entirely. One particularly container-friendly technology is something called Node.js, and I was eager to find a discovery system that used Node. I came across this great article from the Code for Live journal, which was written by some developers at the University of Denver. The article focuses a lot on Elasticsearch, which was useful to me, but it also described how Elasticsearch fit into Denver's digital collections ecosystem, and this included a Node-based discovery front end, which is publicly available in GitHub. When Ink was shut down, it soon became clear that a typical newspaper digitization stack was problematic with few resources. At the same time, a container approach meant dropping some venerable technologies. I'm by no means criticizing any of these crossed-out items, but I realized that the footprint for the front end had to be lightweight. The web display here is the Reclaim Cloud dashboard, and it's a little hard to see the balance figure in the dashboard, but it is the key metric for bringing back a replacement for Ink. And this is where OLRC comes in. One of the crossed-out technologies on the last slide was called an image server, a class of software that is incredibly useful for delivering image-based services, especially for IIIF viewers, which offer a feature-rich ecosystem for interacting with digital objects. Image servers tend to work best with local storage in persistent environments. A web-based storage system like OLRC puts the storage needs of digitized newspapers into the cloud. And the goal is to keep IIIF as a viable technology layer, even if the content doesn't sit behind an image server. To make this all work, I became interested in something called byte ranges, which have been part of web server plumbing since the late 1990s. I have a link to a presentation I did on this for the IIIF consortium in late 2024. Lots of media services on the web, particularly involving video, have used this approach to delivering content for a long time. I was also interested in a format that would work for storing content at the Internet Archive. If nothing else, it would be a possible safe harbor for much of the newspaper content if everything else falls apart. The Internet Archive uses sort of a flat layout, and the scheme for newspapers takes a lot of inspiration from the fantastic work that Kenton Good and Sarah Severson described in their Access Conference presentation. With OLRC, it is possible to use an additional folder layout that helps manage the volume, and the idea is to group newspapers by publisher and date, but still keep a layout consistent with the Internet Archive. I should note that the Internet Archive has IIIF support directly without the need to supply tiles, but OLRC is probably where most of the newspaper content will go because much of it is in copyright. The publishers at the time of the initial newspaper initiative with Knowledge Ontario had agreed to make the content available through our Ontario, which was a sub-project, and its successor organizations. Many, in fact, most of these publishers are no longer around, and going through the hoops is not inviting. Also, OLRC fits really well into our existing workflows and bandwidth. Ironically, a big impetus for trying to get ink back online has nothing to do with digital content. It is to help gather the physical newspapers in the area so they can be stored in a safe place and be available for future projects. Our archivist at the University of Windsor, Sarah Glassford, stepped in to help preserve a local newspaper title called the Kingsville Reporter at the start of the pandemic. And David Hutchison, who is standing on the right with me in the photograph, is a retired professor and local history advocate in Windsor. David helped move several newspapers into the archive even during the pandemic. But this picture was taken a few weeks ago when we moved 2 newspaper titles to campus for storing in the archives. And the prospect of getting online access to the content was an important factor in making the project happen. The examples are endless for what newspaper content can capture. I've always loved these early advertisements from Ford where they are competing with the horse. And this is part of why it is so important to try to make the content available. With AI and machine learning, the newspapers are also a source of new kinds of research. For example, there is a PhD student in computer science at the University of Toronto studying historic weather patterns using historical newspapers. Ontario has a very rich newspaper history and probably has seen more local newspaper closings than any other province in Canada. But the people behind a lot of those newspapers are still around and probably know where the collections ended up. They would also probably welcome efforts to find those pages a good home. And that's it. OLRC has been invaluable to us for our work on newspapers. I'm easy to find if anyone wants to follow up with me directly, and we are always open to collaboration with others. Thank you for listening to this presentation.
Thank you, Art, as you are in transit. And again, if anyone has any questions for Art, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A module, and Art will reply in text. But on that note, I will hand it over to Henry, Kenton, and Sharon from Alberta to talk about AI and digital preservation workflows.
Can you see my slide well?
Yep.
Okay, so obviously hear me well, right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Julie, and also, thanks everyone. My name is Guanwen Zhang. I'm currently working as a digital preservation specialist at the University of Alberta Library. So my colleague Kenton is the head of digital preservation unit, and Sharon Farnel is the head of metadata team. I will be on, on behalf of them, I will be the one to present this. The title is using AI tools to assist digital preservation workflows. So we would like to use folklore as our example, and folklore is special connections in the custody of University of Alberta Library. It has 434 digital items, and these were preserved in UAL's private cloud based on a technology called OpenStack Swift. And this local digital preservation infrastructure have been in production for more than 10 years, but now it is time to retire. So we need to migrate these digital connections to a new destination. The new migration destination is Scholars Portal's permafrost, and a key component of this is permafrost is Archivomatica. And here is the illustration of the original structure of the folklore apes. And each digital items in this connection has a node to uniquely identify each digital items. And a node is like a DIG 6J and a 27 in this example. And it also acts as a root directory for us to organize the data contained in the digital items. And it has 4 subdirectories. We named those as auto, like JP2, METS, METS, and the PDF. And inside each subdirectory, we have a one.tar table. When we untar one of the table, and then it will show a standard list of files, including a manifester and a target manifester, and also a data directory contains the payload of the digital items. And before we migrate to the new digital preservation platform, and then we need to break up the legacy one and then reorganize it. Basically, we keep the same or similar hierarchical structure. The one difference is we replace the METS with META. The reason for this, we added some additional metadata information, and then, for example, like a rise.txt to make this more representative semantically. And also, you can see like a one.tar being removed and then replaced by the data files. And one natural question we ask, can AI be helpful in writing some scripts to accomplish the above task? Because we have more than 34 digital items, and then we do not want to do it manually, and then we would like to eliminate those human intervention and then automate this process so that we can achieve efficiency and also have consistency, and then have the ability to scale up to large data set. So we use the Google Gemini as our AI tools. University of Alberta has an agreement with Google Gemini, and then we can use it through our organizational account. And then we have also have an agreement to protect our data privacy, and so that Gemini will not use our user data for their training purposes, and will not store our data on their server. The question actually starts. It's pretty simple. Basically, it has 3 implicit messages over there. First, I just provided some context and have some background descriptions about our source package's overall structure, which is highlighted in the red color, and then I post the real request, and then please write a shell script that extract only the files inside ./data folder, and then discard all others. And then to make the to add some more refinement, so I require it to organize the output, in a kind of predefined structure similar to the previous the older package. And here's the response from Google Gemini. It provided us with the code and also explanations of the code and the instruction how to use this code. That's pretty helpful. It is our first time, to be honest, to ask AI to write code for serious purposes. And then the results are pretty encouraging. And then we kind of become more motivated. And then we continue to refine our conversation with Gemini and adding more requesters, and then tested the program and checked their outputs. So this is a iterative process. We refined the request 12 times until it worked as intended. So we create a hierarchical directory and add metadata and perform fixed check. Our experience show actually, AI is pretty helpful in this regard, and its degree of helpfulness depends on how clear and how organized when we describe the request in natural language. However, we need to be in the driver's seat, and then we have to provide, instruction and then offer supervisions to the tool. In this case, AI helped in the pre-processing of digital connections, and it is pretty promising to ask AI to help in the whole workflow of digital preservation, which I'm going to show on the next slide. Then here is an illustration of the full workflows of digital preservation when we using Archivematica. It includes different stages, including select and transfer, ingest, preserve, and access. And this presentation showed us a simple AI application to the pre-processing of digital connections. The purpose is to invite the community to extend this simple application so that we can include all stages of digital preservation workflows. And this will help us to achieve efficiency and to keep the to have consistency, and also help us to scale up so that we can work on larger data set. And then that's it. Thank you for your attention. If you have any questions regarding this presentation, please feel free to ask. I would be more than happy to answer your question.
Thank you, Henry, and Kenton and Sharon as well. This was a really interesting presentation. I feel like Alberta always has interesting things to share with using technology to help streamline your preservation processes.
I also would like to comment, right? Over the process, actually, we received a tremendous help from Julie Shi. We really appreciate that. Yeah.
Thank you. I don't think I did very much in terms of the AI side of things.
Yeah, the environment documentation, you point us to the right documentation and also resources, right? So
I'm glad it's helpful.
Lots of applause and hearts and celebrations and from the emoji reactions there. So that's great. Don't see any questions in the Q&A yet. But if any come in, we're going to head into a break now. So if anyone needs an extra minute or two to think of any questions and to put them in the Q&A, please do that. And keep that open for a bit. Otherwise, Thank you so much, Henry. That was fantastic. And yeah, if you wouldn't mind sticking around just another couple minutes, just in case anyone has any questions in the Q&A. Otherwise, I'm going to lead us into a break. We have from 2:40 to 2:55. I'm going to share my slides here. There we go. So we will be back to start our next section, which will be another Scholars Portal update at 2:55. However, we are doing the world famous, most beloved pet parade. So we're going to take like a 5-6 minute break now, full break, and we'll come back at like 2:45, and then we will start the pet parade. So I can promise you don't want to miss it. It's a great lineup this year. So take a few minutes. We'll be back at 2:45 and we'll start the pet parade then, and then we'll start full programming back at 2:55. Thanks. Okay. Welcome back. Let me switch my slides to the favorite slides of the whole event. Everyone prepare yourselves. Ding. Pet Parade. Let's go, folks. Okay, here we go. Pet Parade 2025. Starting off with Vinny. This is Vinny, a very, very fluffy, extremely snuggly orange cat, curled up in the duvet, posing unimpressed. So the duvet photo on the left, in the center, posing, looking quite unimpressed, though very majestically at the top of a snow mountain. And then on the right here, looking very dignified while doing some peaceful morning stretches. And these were submitted by Ellie from Oakle. Next, we have Kermit, who, if you were here yesterday, you got a little sneak peek at Kermit in the Slides of Spring photos. But Kermit is a handsome, sleek black cat with pointy ears and very big, wide eyes. Kermit is lounging across the desk, paws on the keyboard, perhaps typing out a Bridgerton-style gossip column or something like that. So stay tuned. And these are submitted by Allison from Waterloo. Judy, a 6-year-old curly brown labradoodle, very Muppet-like, sitting quite like a human on the couch with all her limbs sprawled, posing very nicely for the camera. She has very fluffy, big paws. Those back paws are enormous, and a very politely curious expression. She's kindly inviting you to come and sit next to her for a little while. And this was submitted by Lynne from McMaster. Poppy. Poppy is a very tiny, fluffy white toy poodle with big brown eyes and a very pink tongue. She's right in front of the camera here. Her favorite things are parks, tennis balls, and sleeping on the couch. She is extremely earnest and ready to play. And this is submitted by Bart from Scholars Portal. Lima, we have 2 photos of Lima here. So she's a very floofy gray poodle with the floppiest ears you've ever seen. She's very good at modeling, seen here posing on the left with a can of Spam on her head, and in the other photo with a lovely sort of cravat type feature by the cherry blossoms. And these are submitted by Carlos from Scholars Portal. We have Oreo, submitted by Amy from Oakle. Oreo is a very handsome black and white tuxedo cat with a very sweet pink nose and the lovely blue collar. And here he is sitting on the couch, investigating via sniffing, though maybe eating, thinking of eating, helping to build the Lego. And it's an R2D2 Lego build. We have Lolo, short for Canolo, who is a 2-year-old Cavapoo. She has gorgeous caramel fur and very beautiful silky ears. Her favorite hobbies are playing with friends, investigating smells, and visiting shops for a treat. And this was submitted by Sarah from OCAD. We have Homer, who is a 2-year-old soft-coated Wheaten Terrier. Homer likes to go canoeing and eat mud. He has over a 4-foot standing vertical jump, which is extremely impressive. That's a really high jump. Here he is in this photo with his very fluffy white coat out in the snow, and he is licking some snowflakes off his nose, very much enjoying winter. This is Nugget. Nugget is a brown and beige ferret and is a fairly new member of the family. This was submitted by Aaron from York. Nugget arrived last Christmas. He is apparently a lot like a cat, though even more fun. But he is also responsible for breaking nearly every glass and mug in the house. And here he is looking rather long and lanky and, frankly, I think entirely innocent. This is Binks, who is a 2.5-year-old rescue void black cat. He's got a love of the watching outdoors through the windows, although a terror of doors leading to the outside world. And he loves to relax with a good CBC Gem series. So do I. And this was submitted by Alex from Oko. This is Gus. This is my submission, but I shan't be biased. Gus is a 3-year-old shaggy golden retriever. He has a very funny set of like under eye eyebrows, whisker type things. They're quite evident in the photo. I never know how to describe them. And they're really growing out of control. Gus is holding his favorite toy, which is a stuffed cappuccino thing that he only gets to play with when someone comes to visit and he needs a distraction. It is duct taped together to keep him from eating the stuffing, his favorite treat. This is Millie. Millie is a beautiful black lab posing here in her garden with pink tulips and what I believe is a crabapple tree blooming behind her. She is an excellent friend and the best adventure partner. This was submitted by Sarah from Guelph. This is Juniper. She's a very sweet tabby cat, I believe, in her new orange and blue life jacket. Her life jacket also matches her kayak, so that's fantastic. And she's now ready for a summer of adventures out on the lake. And this was submitted by Alyssa Conlon, who is from Queen's University, but is also the newest member of the Borealis team and working with the Scholars Portal team. This is Mystique, aka Misty, who has the pointiest ears and the biggest smile. She enjoys playing frisbee with her friends and long walks in the woods. Her talents include herding, from chickens, children, anything that moves, barking at invisible enemies, and shedding. She's a very good girl. And this was submitted by Emily from Trent. Bonnie, Boots, and Bella. Bonnie is a very sweet and a little bit pouty black and brown dog. She has very warm brown eyes and is here. She's all curled up. Her paws are all tucked in. She's looking very calm and restful. And then below in the second photo, we have Boots and Bella, who are a black and white cat and a slightly smaller, again, I think tabby cat. I'm sorry, I'm not great with my types of cats. Sitting together on their top perch of their little cat stand, cozy in their favorite spot. And these are submitted by Andrea from Guelph. Maggie. Maggie made her debut at last year's Pet Parade. She's a wire-haired pointing griffin, and she's now 1 year older. Maggie is even more Muppet-like and can be found curled up on her bed or snooping out the window with her paws in the blanket basket, like she is in the photo on the right here. And these were submitted by Julia from Scholars Portal. Tanya. Tanya is a very playful tortoiseshell cat. She's seen here poking her head out of her little red and blue playground tunnel. If anyone has a few minutes to spare, would they please play for a bit? It would be very much appreciated. And these were submitted by Ravit from Scholars Portal. This is Kit Kat. Kit Kat is a 3-year-old tuxedo cat. She's an efficient alarm system that wakes you up between 3 and 4 a.m. My goodness, through the method of scratching the door or sometimes carpet scratching. During business hours, she will kick you off your office chair so she can take a nap. She loves playing with water but doesn't like getting wet, which is a difficult combo. And these were submitted by Mahana from Scholars Portal. Huck and Aggie. Huck is a very dapper black bunny with perfect paws, named after Huckleberry Finn. And Aggie is an endearing tricolor bunny with very luxurious long ears, named after Agatha Christie. Aggie and Huck are ready for a summer of lounging in the grass and catching sunbeams on the dock. And these were submitted by Liesel from Algoma. And that concludes our pet parade for 2025. Thank you very much to everyone who sent in pet photos. It's truly the highlight of my year. It's the best emails I've ever received in my life. I love to get them, and I already can't wait for next year. So thank you very much. Huge round of applause for all of these fantastic pets. And I look forward to reading the comments in the chat following this. And while that is arguably an extremely difficult act to follow, and I'm very sorry, but everyone's in great spirits now. I'm sure everyone is tuned in. You know, we've fought off the 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock sleepies. Everyone's awake. We're ready to go. So we are now going to move on to our final Scholars Portal update of the event. I'm going to pull up the slides here. Give me 2 seconds to switch back over. There we go. Okay, so our final Scholars Portal update of the event is going to be assessing our services about the Odesi market assessment. And this is going to be presented by the working group co-chairs, Alexandra Cooper and Sandra Keys. So I'm going to pass it over to you two and then just say next slide when you're ready for the next slide.
Thanks, Gabby. Sorry, I had a hard time finding my unmute button, which is, weird. I'm Alex Cooper. I'm the Data Services Coordinator at Queen's University. I'll be presenting today, but Sandra from University of Waterloo is also here. I'm going to give an update on, as Gabby said, on the Odesi market assessment today. So next slide, please. The project was created initially to review and evaluate the market program to ensure that Odesi can continue to deliver effective data curation and meet the needs of local members and their users who are looking for easy access or easier access to data. Next slide. The working group members are made, the working group is made up of members representing the Ontario data community, the market program, SPOD, OCL SP, and Scholars Portal. Next slide. Just getting into a bit of background about what Odesi and the market program is. Odesi was created in 2008 as a bilingual social science data repository containing primarily Statistics Canada and public opinion polls. Next slide. And the market program was started in 2011 to ensure the continuing markup and loading of data sets in Odesi in both French and English. It follows best practices to ensure users can easily find and access the data once it's been marked up. The program is modeled on a distributed staffing model with Scholars Portal providing funding to local schools to hire and supervise students. And the students follow a very well documented curation process, marking up the files down to the variable level, making the data even more findable and usable and accessible. Next slide. So to assess this, the market program, the working group decided on three approaches to assessing it. Sabina and Sandra interviewed market students about their workflows, challenges, and ideas around automation and streamlining. From these interviews, Sabina created the most beautiful workflow map. It's gorgeous. Workflow map, and she developed that workflow map, which the supervisors then reviewed. And then the supervisors were interviewed also by Sabina and Sandra together about the workflow map and the challenges and benefits of the market program from their point of view. And then Sabina went back and edited the workflow map a bit more based on our comments. Next slide. And then the next thing we did, or kind of along the same, we sort of did all of this at the same time. We developed a survey that was sent out to the OCL data community and non-OCL subscribing institutions. And those are institutions that subscribe to the Odesi service outside of Ontario. The ODC community was asked about the MarkIt program, participating in the MarkIt program, and non-OCL schools were asked if they have interest in learning about or participating in the MarkIt program. Next slide. And the main part of the survey, which both groups answered, was about what they thought the important factors, which are listed here on the slide, what the important factors are in choosing a data program. And then they were asked, using these same factors, to comment on Odesi's performance in those factors. And next slide. And then lastly, we had a focus group for both the Ontario data community and the non-OCL subscribing institutions to talk about Odesi in general and the MarkIt program. We discussed the differences between Odesi and other data platforms that they had used, and what were sort of the good and bad and challenging pieces of both. Whether the stakeholders, particularly in library administration, understand the importance of Odesi as a data platform, but also its position in open access, within open access and open research, and also the benefits of and challenges to Odesi and the MarkIt program. Next slide. So some of the preliminary findings we have, we've been analyzing the results from the interviews, the surveys, and the focus group. And the main three results we've seen so far is that Odesi is a very highly valued service. The MarkIt program is playing a very significant role in providing metadata that makes the data more easily accessible and usable, and that MarkIt students are being provided with valuable professional experience that they can use in their future studies and education. And I'd like to just highlight right now that some of the previous MarkIt students are currently working with Odesi, Borealis, and MarkIt. So Amber Leahy and Gidsley Mundeser are both Scholars Portal, working at Scholars Portal, and are the Scholars Portal supervisors in the MarkIt program. And my MarkIt student from last year, Ada Liu, is currently enrolled in the MLIS program at U of T and is a student worker at Scholars Portal with, I think she's primarily working with Borealis. I'll also note that Carolyn Sullivan, who put a note in the chat, is also the former MarkIt student from Western University. So we have people really heading, sometimes in the case of Ada, being directed into the world of data librarianship and Scholars Portal, and moving on and using these, what they learn in the MarkIt program for their future work. And next slide. So we recently sent the interim report to SPOD for review, and the final report with a very long list of recommendations will be spent to SPOD and the OCL directors later this summer. Now, I will note that on the slide, it says May, June. However, we just worked out the timeline to get the final report done. So it's actually closer to the end of the summer that the final report will be going to SPOD and the OCL directors, because we got behind a little bit. So that's everything about the Odesi assessment, or the Odesi MarkIt assessment project. Thank you very much. Oh, and I'm just going to say right off, I have to say thanks to Sabina. She's been an excellent support in doing this assessment project. She kept us on track and organized, and she made a wonderful workflow mapping document. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Alex. I just wanted to mention as well, for those of you who were here yesterday, we had some conversations about the ACE assessment project that we did last year. And I just wanted to say this is part of the same program of doing these service assessments when there's something that's not quite working with a service, to make sure that we can get that 360-degree view from the people who are working with that service at our member libraries, and from that kind of SPOD and OCL SP level, which are really important committees in OCL's governance, so that we can make evidence-based decisions about our services going forward. So I'm really happy that this second time that we've used this framework has been so successful so far, and in part thanks to the brilliant leadership of Alex and Sandra, who are extremely on the ball in getting everything done. And I also wanted to thank everybody who participated in our focus groups and answered our surveys as well. There's one question that's come in so far. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A. The question that's come in so far is about the age of the students. Why did you choose to use them? I'm assuming that they obviously change all the time as they graduate. So do you want to talk about that briefly, Alex?
Yeah, so I've been involved with the MarkIt program pretty much from the beginning. We've had a student here at Queen's since 2011, I think. So each school sort of has its different criteria for choosing students. I tend to focus on undergraduate students. I know when the University of Ottawa was involved, they had graduate students. U of T has gone between both. So it sort of depends on just what the supervisors decide and how they post the jobs. In choosing students, I tend to look for undergrad students who have either some experience or have taken a second-year stats course. And I tend to focus on departments like psychology, sociology, political science, health sciences, because they do have that methodology and statistics course in the second level or the second year. So they're coming in with just a very basic understanding of, at least a basic understanding of data and statistics. They do change from year to year. I lucked out this year. I actually hired a third-year student last September. So she's here for another year. She's working this summer and continuing next year. They do change as they graduate. They do change, which is kind of one of the pain points that we sort of pointed out in the workflow interview. But there's not really much we can do to change that because students come and go. But it is really nice to have the students in the program and hire the students, because each year or every other year, you get a different type of student who knows maybe more Python and coding stuff, so you can give them a different kind of project. Or the student I have right now and Ada from last year were very heavy in SPSS and knew that sort of side of things. So we're able to give them projects that really help them develop that even more. So yeah, I think having the students is great, and they really add to the program. But the problem is that they do graduate, and I sometimes ask them to do master's programs so I can keep them on and not have to hire another student and go through training. Yeah.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, I think having students from so many different backgrounds, from the social sciences where they're kind of using this data in their classes, and from computer science and from library science, leads to some really interesting and different perspectives on the service itself and the data that we're providing. So
yeah, and there's actually one student, I think he's at U of T right now, who is working on a project related to the labor force survey that has programming background and has actually written code to speed up what he was doing. So we do get students every now and then that have some sort of skills like, why didn't we think of this before and get a student in to do this for us before? So they bring a lot of energy and sometimes different perspectives that we end up changing the process of something that just makes it better for moving forward. So yeah, it's a great program.
All right, well, keep an eye out, everyone. The final report will be sent to directors later this summer and will be distributed more broadly after that. We'll move on right now. Gabby, if you can change the slide to our final session of the day, which is a lightning talk. Alex can't go away quite yet. Our last presentation of the day is a lightning talk about the Canadian Data Rescue Project with Kristi Thompson from Western University and Alex Cooper continuing along. So take it away.
Thanks. I'm going to share my slides, but I just realized I foolishly closed it when I had it open a few minutes ago. So just sorry. Okay, and share. Okay, can you see my slides?
Not yet. You might need to press share. There might be another submit or share.
I did it wrong. Yeah, sorry. Let me try again. Okay. There we go. Can you see them now?
Nope.
No? Oh. I have to click on share. Sorry, I didn't click on share. I do know how to do this, really.
Awesome.
Sorry about that.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Good. Okay. Ready to go? Okay. Hi, this is Kristi Thompson, co-conspirator with Alex Cooper, just here to tell you some scary stuff about data destruction. Next slide. In January of this year, the US federal government barred the use of some terms relating to gender and equity on government websites, which had a lot of cascading effects. Many US government data sets used by researchers around the world disappeared from those websites, along with articles, reports, and other related documents. Not to mention random things like photographs of a certain historical airplane named Enola Gay. Next, entire departments and data collection systems. Next, entirely departments and data collection systems began to disappear. The so-called Department of Government Efficiency has been hacking away at social, health, and labor data collections. They've destroyed the entire National Center for Education Statistics, cut data on pregnancy risk assessment, deaths and injuries, greenhouse gas emissions. They're even cutting the National Weather Services. So it's not just that they're removing data and things from websites. The data simply won't be collected anymore by anyone. It won't exist. Next slide. Until now, the US government has made vast quantities of raw, unprocessed data available to researchers for analysis and provided tools to allow journalists and members of the public to quickly answer questions about economics and human impact. The kind of destruction they're doing now goes beyond data loss. It's a deliberate effort to disrupt and control discourse by limiting what can be known. It's a hostile political act. Government data is unique because the government has the ability to require and enforce collection of information from groups that could otherwise keep their activities secret, including the government itself, of course. Government-collected survey and monitoring data is a major and difficult to ignore or discredit source of information on social inequity, changing conditions, and policy impact. The effect is to disrupt the entire system of knowledge that both allows governments to function effectively and allows external observers to see that they function effectively. Next slide. If data destruction is a political act, then data preservation can be an act of political resistance. In February of this year, several US academic and nonprofit associations got together to form the Data Rescue Project. Since then, they have worked to preemptively download data, create documentation, and prepare the data for ingest and publication on donated platforms. It's not possible to create automated processes for all these different resources, So this has required them to do immense hands-on effort, and they posted several data rescue events to bring in volunteers. Next slide. Canada has also flirted with data destruction. Under Prime Minister Stephen Harper, Canada's government cut major data programs. They destroyed education statistics, eliminated a lot of climate and environment data, including shutting down monitoring stations and throwing away records that had already been collected, instituted major cuts at Statistics Canada, and killed the First Nations Statistical Institute. There was also the cancellation of the Census 2011 long form, which led to the resignation of Canada's national statistician and disrupted the baseline for all social and health data collection in Canada for the next several years. Note that these cuts have points in common with the elements targeted by the Trump administration: elimination of environmental monitoring, disruption of social data collection, targeting marginalized groups, and limiting the ability of journalists and nonpartisan organizations to know what is going on. What is happening in the US now is unusual in scope, but it is by no means unique. Next slide. Canada also has a history of data resistance, which these acts brought out. The Canadian Association of Public Data Users was one of many groups to push back on the cancellation of the census long form, among other losses. Kim Selkendai maintained a blog for CAPTU from 2010 to 2014, reporting on casualties and rabble-rousing. Separately, in 2015, a group of librarians in Ontario, including myself and Alex, noticed that government data sets being shared under a unfunded open government mandate were unusable and formed a group to rescue this data. We prioritized and rescued several unique collections. The group lapsed after a few years, but Alex and I continued to meet occasionally to discuss data rescue and hoard files in need of preservation. Next slide. Then all this stuff happened. After reading about the American Data Rescue Project, I unwisely posted on Canada's main research data listserv. I was wondering if there were any Canadian initiatives to work on helping with this, or interested in starting one. A certain Eugene Barsky, one of the great rabble-rousers of the Canadian data world, replied, "Please count me in, Kristi," and other expressions of interest happened, but no actual action. So, over to Alex.
Sorry, this time I forgot to click my audio button. Shortly after Kristi and I had one of our regular data rescue chats, we decided to host a national Zoom discussion because nobody else was volunteering, which snowballed into the founding of the Canadian Data Rescue Project. We've since hosted some events to support data rescue efforts in the States, and we're setting up preservation life supports for the Canadian data ecosystem. We currently have about 30 active volunteers to help with the project and are meeting regularly to get the work started. We are focusing this initial rescue on the Canadian Open Government Portal website and setting priorities based on priorities for data based on what could be at risk and high interest data sets such as immigration and refugees data, Indigenous data, and labor force data. So far, about 95 people have joined our listserv from institutions across Canada. And looking forward, we want to turn this project into a much more sustainable, ongoing project, similar to what the Canadian Government Information Digital Preservation Network is doing with their end-of-term crawl. And next summer, we hope to start a project to extract the data from Canadian government CDs that date back to the 1980s. These CDs are in most Canadian academic library collections and contain data that is potentially lost to proprietary software and needing older versions of Windows, such as Windows XP. If you'd like to volunteer or join the listserv just to sit in the background and watch what we do, you can use this QR code to get to our OSF website. The link to the website is also there. And I'll just say thank you. And listed here is some further reading about both US and Canadian data rescue efforts. Thanks. And I'll also stop sharing.
All right. Thank you so much for that update on that amazing work and for stepping up to do that amazing work. I think this is an initiative that everybody knows is super important, but it's one of those things that, you know, you need somebody to get in there and be the first person to put their hand up to organize it. So thank you so much. I don't know if we have any time for questions. If anybody has any questions, you can enter them into the Q&A, and Alex and Kristi can answer them there. Also, I wonder if you can put the link to your OSF site into the chat, just because I'm sure there's a lot of people who are interested in looking at that. Okay, well, that was our final session for Scholars Portal Day, and I am now going to pass it over to Andrew Colgoni and Lynne Serviss, who are the chairs of the OCL SP OCL Scholars Portal Committee, to do some wrap-up remarks.
Hello, everyone. There you are, Andrew. Hi. So hi, everyone. I'm Lynne Serviss, and I'm joined with my colleague, Andrew Colgoni. And together we are the co-chairs of the OCL Scholars Portal Subcommittee, otherwise known as OCL SP. This committee advances OCL's strategic priorities by providing a forum for discussion of the delivery of Scholars Portal services. So each year as chairs, we have the privilege of delivering the closing remarks for SP Days. The time we have spent together over the past 2 days has given us the opportunity to pause, reflect, and share the amazing accomplishments of our community. And I'm very proud to be part of such an inspiring group. Reflecting on this year's SP Days beautifully designed website, I was struck by the image of the bees and the little tiny bees, the beehive and the little tiny bees that are scattered throughout the beehive. These visuals captured this year's theme, building with intention. Like us, bees build with collaboration and purpose. They are always working towards an end goal that benefits everyone. Did you know that bees are remarkably industrious little creatures? A honeybee beats its wings about 11,400 times per minute, and a single bee produces about 1/12 of a teaspoon of honey in its entire lifetime. Now, that's not even enough honey to cover a corner of your piece of toast. Yet, the hive, working collectively, can produce up to 55 pounds of honey in a year. It's very impressive to see the accomplishments when an entire hive is working together. In the same way, the intentional work of each individual in our community, though it may be small on its own, adds up to something truly remarkable. Although our services and products may not be as sweet as honey, together we are crafting meaningful products and services that benefit everyone. So yesterday afternoon, I was driving my oldest son, Peter, to a tennis tournament, and we listened to the keynote in our car. And I want to extend my personal thanks to Bianca Wiley for delivering what I consider to be a truly top-notch lecture. She probably didn't plan on writing something for teens, but for one 11th grader, Peter, he took away some life lessons. And here is what Peter learned. Ask questions when you don't understand. It's okay to slow down the process. It's okay to disagree. Write stuff down, even the hard stuff, and work on building solid relationships. But remember, these take time, so be patient. And these are great life lessons that I would have received a teenage eye roll if I tried to teach them. So thank you, Bianca. Moving on to some of our lightning talk highlights. 2 of our lightning talks focused on specific efforts that reflect a shared commitment to accessibility, intentionally building systems and partnerships that make our services more inclusive and sustainable across OCL through improving the ACE service. And our friends from the Collective Collecting Working Group highlighted the value of intentionally building shared collections. We also learned some creative ways to use Borealis API and LibKey Nomad++ to provide enhanced access to resources and services. And the day ended from our OCL AIML group, where we were encouraged to complete their short survey online, so please don't forget to do so. And finally, I would be remiss if I did not mention our legendary Pet Parade and newly editioned Spring Photo Parade. Thank you very much for bringing this production back year after year. It makes everyone laugh and it gives us all the warm fuzzies. And I think I would like to personally award Lima with Spam on Head the best photo, but please do not tell my own dog Judy that. And over to you, Andrew, to close us out.
Thank you, Lynn. So looking to today, we received updates on Scholars Portal initiatives, including perpetual access, GeoPortal redevelopment, Scholaris, digital preservation, and Odesi. These updates showcase the wonderful diversity of work being done at SPHQ, including the core work of access and preservation, but also the refinement and improvement of key tools like GeoPortal and Odesi, and the significant collaboration and quote unquote gardening taking place with Scholaris. These insights into the tools and platforms that support our work in libraries have been invaluable. Our lightning talk speakers today brought depth and nuance to these themes, highlighting the critical considerations of precarity, sustainability, cost, and efficiency that underpin this work. Their presentations reminded us that behind every digital tool and platform are real decisions about resources, values, and impact. And the recurring emphasis on preservation, whether it's government documents, digital assets, or data rescue that we just heard, underscores our collective responsibility to build resilient and lasting resources. But as we've also heard over these 2 days, this work really does require us to think critically and clear-eyed about our intentions and values, ensuring that what we preserve and how we preserve it truly serves our communities. I want to give a big thank you on behalf of OCLSP and everybody to our Scholars Portal team for their ongoing work, only some of which we've glimpsed here over the past 2 days. Scholars Portal truly is a powerhouse for our library community, and it is a privilege to sit on OCLSP and learn about the improvements that are taking place month after month, driven by the commitment to building with intention that has been this year's theme. And although they've already been thanked twice today, I have to do it again for our planning team for Scholars Portal Days, chaired by Gabby Crowley, with members Sarah Simpkin, Katrina Fortner, Cheryl Hook, Sabina Pagato, and Lynn Serviss. Thank you all, and please join me in virtual applauding that team. Congratulations on the success of the past 2 days. You've created a space for meaningful dialogue about the future of our collaborative work. And like the industrious bees that have been woven throughout our conversations, we can see how intentionality, collaboration, sustainability, and innovation are key to building successful and impactful projects. We are also reminded, though, to take a step back, ask questions, slow down, and ensure the work that we are doing is thoughtful and elevates us all. So as we return to our respective institutions, our hives, we carry with us the insights shared here and the renewed commitment to building with intention. Thank you all for joining us at Scholars Portal Days 2025, and have an amazing weekend. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. That concludes Scholars Portal Days 2025. Thank you for coming. Thank you to all of our presenters and speakers. Please take a minute to fill out the feedback survey. There's a link to that in the chat, but we will also follow up with an email about that. But if you could take a few moments to fill that out, we would really appreciate it. That would be really helpful for us. And then stay tuned for an email with the links to the event recordings as well in the coming weeks. If you have any questions at all, please send us an email, help@scholarsportal.info. Have a wonderful weekend. Okay, I'm going to